stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, tonight's meeting is being broadcast live by Boston City TV, Comcast Channel 24, RCN Channel 13, and FiOS Channel 1962, and YouTube Live as well. It will be rebroadcast at a later date. If anyone wishes to sign up for public comment, please see our school committee staff, Ms. Lena Parvix, out in the hallway. Sign up for public comment will be closing at 6:30 p.m. this evening. Now, at this time, I would like to invite the superintendent and my colleagues on the school committee to please join me on the floor for a special presentation. Hello, is that on? Yes, you can hear me. At the risk of engaging in yet another Irish wake for Mr. O'Neill, we just wanted to take a moment to honor our past chairperson and our dear colleague, Mr. Michael O'Neill, for his years of service to this committee and with this committee, including, most importantly, the last 5 years with the committee as our chairperson. The Boston School Committee has been extremely fortunate to operate under the leadership of Mr. O'Neill for the past 5 years. During that time, Mr. O'Neill has always stayed focused on what is best for students. Now, under his leadership, the committee has established, reauthorized, and supported several school committee task forces to dig deeply into critical areas facing BPS, including opportunity and achievement gaps, English language learners, inclusion, and school quality, and most recently, an audit and risk management subgroup that we'll be getting started on very shortly. And now, he led the national search as well that brought Superintendent Chang to Boston, and we're grateful to him for that. And this is notably the most transparent superintendent search in our city's history. Perhaps most importantly, Mr. O'Neill set a tone of open communication and respect, encouraging all members of the community to engage with the district where their voice is valued and respected. As you all know, Mr. O'Neill decided not to seek another term as chair. We are delighted, however, that he remains an active and valuable member of this body. And tonight, the school committee and the superintendent wish to honor Mr. O'Neill's leadership with this citation, which reads, if you'll excuse me, the Boston School Committee extends its appreciation to Michael D. O'Neill, Boston School Committee chairperson from 2013 to 2017, in recognition of his sound stewardship and tireless efforts to improve educational opportunities for students and families in the Boston Public Schools. Be it further known that the chairperson and members of the school committee of the City of Boston join with the superintendent of schools in thanking Mr. O'Neill for his continued commitment to the youth of Boston, dated January 10, 2018. Mr. O'Neill, thank you. I'd like to ask Superintendent if he'd like to say a few words.
So I did share kind of my intimate thoughts last week, but I do want to say that the work between a superintendent and a chairperson is critical for a school system, and just very proud that this individual brought me to Boston, led the efforts to bring me to Boston, and as I shared with folks last week, rarely do you actually see a chairperson and superintendent standing side by side everywhere we go nationally. It's actually, you would think it would be a lot more frequent, but unfortunately it's not. But in Boston, we always stood side by side. So I appreciate your stewardship, your friendship, your mentorship. and congratulations.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to say anything while we're down here? We did it all last week. That's what I thought. Let's get back to work. Sounds good to me. Thank you. And now, for those of you that are joining us this week, I just wanted to briefly note that we did have a number of folks speak in an extended way to honor Mr. O'Neill last week. I also had the chance to speak a little bit about how fortunate I feel and how thankful I feel to my fellow members for selecting me as the new chair and servant of this body. I hope I can bring to this role the same dedication and efforts that Mr. O'Neill, Reverend Groover, and so many other chairs that have come before me in this role have committed themselves to. And I do want to note that I am new, so hello, and I might make a few mistakes here and there, but I can guarantee for you that I will give you my 110% effort every time out, and I look forward to attacking this new role with vigor. And so I look forward to doing that, and without further ado, I want to move on to the approval of the minutes. If the minutes are approved as presented, hard copies will be made available in the hallway with the other handouts. If changes are made, you can access the minutes tomorrow on the BPS website. Now at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the December 6, 2017 meeting, December 13th, 2017 meeting, and the January 3rd, 2018 organizational meeting as presented. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, is there any objection to approving the minutes by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Now we'll move on to the superintendent's report. I present to you our superintendent, Dr. Tommy Chang.
Thank you, Chairperson Lecanto. Again, congratulations. And thank you, Michael O'Neill, for your incredible leadership over the last 5 years as the committee's chair. This evening, I have several updates and several bright spots in no particular order. And then I'm going to end my remarks today with just some general comments in light of Dr. King's holidays. So let me start off by just sharing with everybody the incredible effort over the last week to clean up after the snowstorm. I want to give a special shout out to all our hardworking custodians, supervisors, bus yard crews, and members of our facilities department who worked long nights and long days, endured frigid temperatures in order to make sure our schools were ready, our buses were ready for Monday's return of our young people. In some schools, crews had to repeatedly shovel, plow, salt the same areas for 4 straight days. And of course, there was also the unrelenting wind that kind of caused more snow to drift. To give you a little understanding of what it took to get our 127 school buildings and more than 700 buses back in operations, a crew of about 500 BPS custodians operating 200 snow blowers, 130 salt spreaders, 200 ice choppers, 450 shovels, and using 250,000 pounds, cleared some 700 school exit doorways, 750 external staircases, and 127 bus stop locations. And we also had contractors that worked with us. We had used 35 snow plows and removed snow from more than 5 million square feet of sidewalks and school parking lots. And so it was definitely a challenging week. We had record low temperatures, and needless to say, there were a lot of tired folks. So I just want to take a moment to really thank them for their efforts. Second, as many of you have heard, our president and the current United States administration has decided to end temporary protective status for Salvadorian immigrants. It's very similar to Haitian immigrants several months ago. And for our Salvadorian immigrants, they've lived legally in the United States for nearly 2 decades, and many of them are in our workforce. There are families, they bought homes, they pay taxes. Now more than 200,000 immigrants from El Salvador nationwide who left El Salvador mainly because of an earthquake that struck in 2001 could face deportation within 2 years. I just want to remind everyone and reinforce the message that Boston Public Schools stands strongly with students, families, staff of all cultural and linguistic backgrounds. We've worked tirelessly to create safe, welcoming, and sustaining environments for our young people. The district does have our website, bpswedreamtogether.org, which offers resources. It provides information in various languages, the actual facts about TPS, immigrant rights, deferred action for childhood arrivals, and family preparedness plans. So the information is there. It's translated to 9 different languages. So I encourage everyone to go onto that website. Also, there's a link to a Department of Homeland Security website with the latest information. There's also information on the City of Boston's Office of Immigration Advancement website. You can also call them at 617-635-2980 or 311, and also the Irish International Immigrant Center. You can reach them at 617-542-7654. So in these uncertain times, our message remains the same. Boston Public Schools, the City of Boston will continue to support families and students of all backgrounds. And we will do everything we can to help our students remain focused on learning, which is most important. Next item. Last night, this is a bright spot. Last night, Dorchester Academy held its senior awards dinner at Maggiano's restaurant to celebrate the graduating seniors. I got the opportunity to join Headmaster Freddie Fuentes and Senior Program Director Maggie Reese in honoring 10 graduates of Dorchester Academy. The highlight of the night came when Brandon Shia, who is a graduating senior at the school, delivered the student address and shared his personal struggle finishing high school. I want to give a very special shout out to the staff at the school. The staff and this group of seniors are going to be forever tied. They went through much difficulty at the beginning of the year, but really came together as a school community to make sure that those young people got the education they needed. And we have 10 of them who are graduating from Boston Public Schools. I know many of the folks in this room also attended that graduation. And I just want to commend this very special group of students for their resiliency and their determination in achieving the goal of high school graduation. A couple of other bright spots to share. I'm proud to announce that the Boston Public Schools has received 2 grants from the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, totaling over $500,000, specifically $550,000. These plans will go a long way to helping support and improve the quality of our instruction. Let me tell you a little bit about each grant. The first one is a $275,000 grant that will go towards building teacher leadership. This is a grant we co-wrote with the Boston Teachers Union. We will use these funds to improve and personalize professional learning for our high school teachers. The goal is to empower teacher voice in the process of needs assessment so professional learning is more relevant to their individual needs. This effort will be led by a, quote, networker, an innovative new teacher leadership role. The networker connects teachers with shared learning interests to one another for job-embedded, teacher-led professional development. Along with the district's high school academics team, the networker also cultivates and curates best practices aligned to the essentials for instructional equity, which is Boston Public Schools' vision for coherent, student-centered learning in all classrooms. I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Paul Tritter, who is the Director of Professional Learning for the Boston Teachers Union, and Shakira Walker, who is the BPS Director of Teacher Development, for leading an effort in gaining this grant. The second grant that we received from Nellie Mae comes from our BPS Office of Innovation. The $275,000 grant will be used to design the BPS Innovation Incubator. It's a personalized process to support school teams in redesigning teaching and learning environments to make them more aligned to our college, career, and life definition. The incubator will be an iterative process that develops screening tools, innovation competencies, self-reflection rubrics, quantitative and qualitative data gathering methods, and ways for learning to give feedback to the district as a whole. As part of the process, a redesigned organization with roots in Stanford's D School and IDEO will provide a cohort and school-based professional development fellowship that will grow innovation and collaborative leadership capacity. The incubator will support 3 cohorts of BPS school teams, reaching a total of 60+ educators. I want to acknowledge Sujata Bhatt, who is BPS's managing partner for innovation, for spearheading this effort. And for both these grants, definitely want to thank Makiba McCurry, our managing partner for external affairs, and her team for also helping with this effort. So incredible that we got 2 of these major grants from the Nellie Mae Foundation to really focus on a work of transforming teaching and learning in our schools. A few other bright spots and updates. The JFK GE Foundation STEM Scholarship Program. The JFK Library Foundation and the GE Foundation have established a scholarship program to assist BPS high school seniors who plan to continue their education in college and major in a STEM field of study. The 2018 program is accepting applications right now through February 1st. So anyone who is interested in this scholarship, and I'm going to please encourage everyone to spread the word around. We've also been spreading this word around on social media. Please go online. You can apply at www.scholarsapply, all one word, www.scholarsapply.org/JFK-GE. Next update. I want to share with everyone that Thursday, January 11th, tomorrow, we will have our 36th annual MA, actually that's Friday. Isn't it Friday?
It's Thursday.
It's Thursday? Okay, I just want to double check. Tomorrow, Thursday, January 11th, will be our 36th annual MLK celebration at the Strand Theater from 6:30 to 8:30. Please come and join the dance ensembles, the acting, the spoken word, and the student-produced videos that all will celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. Admissions is free, all is welcome. Next update. On Monday, February 12th, the BPS Office of Social Emotional Learning and Wellness will be hosting the 3rd annual Social Emotional Learning Forum entitled SEL Matters, Transforming Learning Experiences for All. The SEL Forum will be taking place at the Northeastern University McLeod Suites from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Throughout the day, participants will have the opportunity to deepen their understanding and learning of essential number 1, which is focused on creating and maintaining safe, healthy, and sustaining learning environments for all students. And we are also pleased to announce that Zaretta Hammond, who is a best-selling author of Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, she's a national expert on culturally relevant teaching. She not only will be the keynote speaker, but she will also facilitate a panel series event in the evening here at the Bruce C. Bowling building. And that will be open to the larger Boston community. So I wanted to give folks kind of heads up. It is in about a month. It's February 12th. And it is being led by the BPS Office of Social Emotional Learning and Wellness. You see that on the screen right now. I also want to share an opportunity that is forthcoming for Boston Public Schools to recruit multilingual and English as second language educators. That job fair will be held Tuesday, March 20th from 5 to 7 p.m. at English High School. This event is, we're looking for teachers who are certified to teach ESL and teachers certified to teach any subject who are also fluent in one of BPS's official languages. We are also currently developing advertisements for this event in both English and Spanish, directly targeting educators from Puerto Rico. So if you know teachers and other educators who are from Puerto Rico, please share this information with them. This is an opportunity for those educators. Last update. In recent days, we have discovered that there are some concerns and issues with Discover BPS. We are going to be sending out more clarity and more information in the next 24 hours. I just want to acknowledge that publicly and to let parents who are watching to know to please look out on our website for information that will be forthcoming. We know that there are some technical problems that need to be addressed, and they will be addressed immediately. And I'm going to finish my remarks today by sharing some reflections with the school committee and those in the audience, especially in advance of Dr. Martin Luther King's holidays this weekend. This weekend, annually, is always our opportunity to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. It's also a time of the year where I do a lot of personal reflection. I reflect about my role as a citizen of this country and my role as the leader of the school system. One of his most profound and seminal works that many of you may be familiar with is Letters from a Birmingham Jail. It was written April 16th, 1963, while Dr. King sat in a jail in Birmingham, Alabama, and he was being jailed for leading the protest against segregation and racism in that city. And his letter was a response to an open letter written in a local newspaper published by 8 clergymen criticizing Dr. King's actions. And again, I often pick up that piece of work for reflection, and I want to share some reflections with you. We live in a country. It's diverse racially, culturally, linguistically, and given our immense diversity, we're relatively not as divided as a country as many other places in this world. We mostly get along, as someone recently said. But getting along should not hide the serious inequities that exist in our society and should not make us complacent for the need for change. I think this school committee understands this reality, and that is why you are not satisfied that BPS is a high-functioning urban school system. But you recognize serious opportunity and achievement gaps that exist. This body has made the closing of those gaps its driving priority. And to harken back to the theory of action, in order to close those opportunity and achievement gaps, we have to transform learning so our students, all our students, are challenged, engaged, and honored as who they are in their learning. Our students must be taught to communicate, collaborate, think creatively, and critically, all 21st century skills. And this is a premise of the city's college, career, and life readiness definition, as well as BPS's work on the essentials for instructional equity. Furthermore, based on our theory of action, we have to build a sustainable system. We have to look head on at the structures that do drive inequity in our school system and we have to write them. This will require us to shape the district so it's transparent and predictable to families, so that each school is viable and has a financial and operational ability to succeed. Our 6 priorities: instructional coherence, adult learning, district reconfiguration, allocating funds more equitably, supporting our lowest performing schools, improving customer service, are all aimed at transforming learning and building a more sustainable system. And we must not lose urgency for this work. This is where I'm going to harken back to what Dr. King said in his writing. Dr. King argues in the letter of Birmingham jail that, quote, "For years now, I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. But change will not come easy and never does. Dr. King laments that, quote, "It is a historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. Individuals may see the moral light and voluntarily give up their unjust posture, but groups tend to be more immoral than individuals. The opportunity and achievement gaps that exist are not the fault of any one person or any one body. It's a collective legacy of years and decades of decisions, policies, and practices that have to be deconstructed. I believe it can be done because it is not only a moral imperative, but it's also vitally important for the survival and future success of our students. And that is why we cannot let our disagreements divide us. There is much to accomplish together to drive out inequities in our city, to serve as a bright spot for the rest of the country. And my commitment to this school committee and to all the families is to do a better job at working alongside families, school leaders, community partners, young people to drive for more equity in BPS. BPS will strive always to unite people with both problems and solutions and do a better job of sharing why our students will benefit from a new policy, to listen so that we can resolve historical inequitable policies so all students can enjoy the benefits of a rigorous and supportive education, and ultimately prepare them for college, career, and life. And I just want to emphasize we will do this together. And with that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Chang, and thank you for invoking the words of Dr. Chang, Dr. King.
Dr. King.
Yes, Dr. King, and reminding us of the work that's left to do in our district and in our city. I'll open up to questions or discussion from the committee.
I just have a comment.
Ms.
Thank you.
Alva-Davila?
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations again on your new
Thanks.
chairmanship.
Thank you.
I just wanted to take a minute to just say thank you for sharing that, and thank you for, once again, talking and speaking up about what's happening with our Salvadorian families. I think that's really important that we keep bringing this up and bringing it back because it is important. It's very traumatic, so I thank you for that. And I just wanted to say the last 2 months were a little rough for everybody as a district, and I was able to go to some of the meetings that we had around start time. I know other members went to other meetings as well. And I just really wanted to thank all of the families, whether you were here or not here. We heard from people via email, letters, et cetera. And I just want to say that I hope that that kind of engagement continues. I know that it was a sore spot, but I'm hoping that we can, again, come together, as you said. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Chang, for listening to all the families and for everybody also, obviously, listening to families. And I think it takes a very strong leader to actually take a step back and say, you know what, I heard what was said, and I recognize it, and we're going to take a step, and I really appreciate that. That's why I appreciate being part of this committee, to be able to do that when we hear from our families and figure out. I think it's also an exciting time to think about how we engage our families better. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alva-Davila. Are there any other questions or discussion?
I agree with what
Ms. Robinson.
Alex has said, and particularly want to thank the community members also that that hosted meetings, because some of them, I mean, it was a very difficult time. It was very near the holidays, but parents came out and we heard from a wide variety of families in terms of their needs, and realizing that we really need to hear from all families, because their needs are different, not just the families that can organize themselves to come together, but providing an opportunity so that we hear really from all of the very different needs that families have, and try our best together to figure out how to make solutions so that more families have what they need.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. If there's nothing further, I'll now entertain a motion to receive the superintendent's report as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, is there any objection to approving the superintendent's report by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the motion carries. Now, before we move on to general public comment, we've begun a tradition here in the committee to invite our student representative, Mr. McClay, to present a monthly update on the works and the actions of the Boston Student Advisory Council. So without further ado, Mr. McClay, please.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So Happy New Year, and again, welcome to Chairman Lecanto. On behalf of BSAC and myself, we look forward to continuing to work to provide youth perspective on pertinent issues to students for BSAC and continuing the great work that we do. And we also wanted to say thank you for Chairman O'Neill for the years of dedication to make sure that we have student representatives from all the schools that come in front of school committee. We also want to welcome Mr. Abraham Azario to the BSAC family as one of our new BSAC coordinators. He's located right in the back of the room. So our BSAC coordinator, Maria Ortiz, is moving to a BSAC manager role, and we are excited to have Abraham on board to provide college and career readiness supports for our students, as well as social emotional supports and referrals as needed. Since the last update on December 6th, we had an amazing opportunity to present our major campaigns to some of our youth partners throughout Boston. We presented on our climate curriculum, dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline, and our student rights and responsibilities app. One of the major groups that we got to present to was the Mayor's Youth Council, and we got to look at some of the parallels in the projects that they're doing and their future projects, as well as some of our future projects. And we are also thrilled to have Alana Bannister and myself serve as the student representative on the Boston Public Schools Dismantling School-to-Prison Pipeline Working Group. We also have 2 students serving on the Exam School AWC Working Group, as well as 2 students who will be serving on the BPS Wellness Council. We would like to highlight a BSAC student writer, Kendra, who wrote an amazing article on social and emotional wellness in schools and the need for more counselors, not cops, in our schools. Her article will be featured in the January edition of Teens in Print's newspaper, which will be circulated throughout the city of Boston. We want to thank Ben Vayner, Director of Strategic Innovation in the Mayor's Educational Cabinet, Tommy Welsh, Associate Superintendent, and Dan Anderson, Executive Director of Strategy, for coming to our BSAC meeting this Monday and engaging us in the conversation around Bill BPS implementation plan, as well as school reconfiguration. We look forward to continuing the dialogue with them and seeing the students' comments reflected in upcoming updates from them. Additional student engagement that we have done was we held 3 town halls last year that were well attended, and in preparation for budget season, which starts soon, we seek to engage more students in the conversation. We are planning to host several student town halls this year. We hope to focus on BPS budget and continue student engagement on the Bill BPS plan, as well as great reconfiguration process. BSAC will work to engage other groups throughout the city, such as Mayor's Youth Council, Teen Empowerment, hopefully Sociedad Athena, and looking for some possible facilitators of these meetings. Also, a BSAC update for enrollment. We have reached 61 students from 26 high schools, which is 75% enrollment representation on BSAC. We still look forward to continuing getting to 100%, and we look for support from the school committee again in getting to that goal. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McClay. And we always, I think I speak for my fellow committee members when we say we always love hearing all the good work that the students are doing on behalf of their education in the district and your education in the district. So thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion for Mr. McClay following his report? Okay. Well, we'll move on to general public comment then. Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. The public comment period is an opportunity for parents and other concerned parties to make brief presentations to the school committee on pertinent school issues. Questions on specific school matters are not answered at this time, but are referred to the superintendent for later response. Questions on specific policy matters are not answered at this time, but may be the subject of later discussion by the committee. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll remind you when you have 1 minute remaining, and then 30 seconds. Those who require interpretation services will be allotted an additional 2 minutes. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. Written testimony is appreciated and encouraged. Please state your name and affiliation before you begin. TV cameras will only record speakers who face the committee. We have 11 speakers this evening, beginning with Beverly Hilaire, and she'll be followed by Stephen Hilaire and Harrison Hilaire.
Is this Cassidy?
Please.
Hello. My name is Beverly Hilaire. I am mother of Stephen and Harrison Hilaire. We live in West Roxbury. My children used to attend the Grew School in Hyde Park and the Ornberger School in West Roxbury, right outside my house. I bought that home because you buy the best house or the opportunity to get the better house in the better neighborhood to get the better education. However, the afterthought is that I found most parents in West Roxbury are having tutors, and the schools are not living up to what they should. So I also own a home in Dorchester, but I can't get a school there either. My children have dyslexia, and so does 1 in 5 of every other student in the public school system, and that's a nationwide statistic. Boston Public Schools, according to the website, said that the 2014 report has 54,000 children or more, and I'm sure that's grown. And that 10% is special ed. So that comes out to about 10,800. But if the 1 in 5 students have dyslexia and the special ed department is also 10%, that would make dyslexia, in theory, similar to the full size of the special ed department that we have. So with Assistant Director of Special Ed, Michelle Plass-Collins, I had visited 3 other schools after our IEP in my independent education eval, only to find that there were no certified teachers to teach dyslexia to my children. There was no separate classroom. There was the paraprofessional at the language school, which is the Sumner School in Roslindale. The paraprofessional in that class was teaching the teacher. If that's the language special school and there's no certified teachers there to teach, who am I supposed to go to and where am I supposed to go? So we did find a couple certified teachers at the Mather School who specialize in, but they're there for a learning disability school. So because the other children don't qualify for the multi-sensored sequential learning that my children need, my children can't get their services every day. They can only get their reading on Monday and Tuesday and their math on Wednesday and Thursday in blocks when they need 5 periods of 45-minute sessions per class.
30 seconds.
This is all back then. We are now at Landmark School. I have 2 students there. My other daughter goes to Metco, and I'm really pissed that I live in a city paying more than $1 million in mortgages for schools that don't match our services. I have asked for reimbursement. I've asked for an out-of-district placement. We did not get a transfer. We didn't get a placement. We didn't get anything from BPS, and I had to go through the Senate office to get a school bus to take my kids to school. I think the same services that you're putting up and the same facade that you're trying to put on for ESL needs to happen for dyslexia as well. And I also want services for my children. I'm still paying taxes here, and my whole family is displaced, and they don't get home until 6, 7 o'clock at night. They travel 100 miles a day. So by the end of the school year, when we get to 180 school days, my children would have traveled 18,000 miles to go back and forth to school every day. I've spoken to everyone there is, except for Mr. Chang, because he doesn't answer phone calls or return emails. But there is no one that has been not talked to. I talked to his assistant, who's the ombudsperson. I've spoken to the chief of education. I've gone directly to the mayor and everyone else that's in the office that has a say-so to do something. I've gone through mediation. The mediation was not processed, and my kids still ended their school year without a placement, so I unilaterally placed them into that school. I want answers, and I want to know, is there a master list that says these are the children, these are the teachers who are certified to teach these children, and where are they placed? Because one thing that happened is they kept asking me, what school do you want to go to? And I said, it doesn't matter what school I go to. I want the teacher. If you can produce a teacher that's certified, I'll go there. And if you can produce a teacher that has passion, I'll take her. No one was produced. And this has been going on for more than 2 or 3 years now. My children are in their 2nd year.
Ms. Hilaire, thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Ms. Hilaire. And if I can ask our Director of Special Education, Cindy Nielsen, to meet you in the back of the room. She can speak to you and hear some more about your concerns
Cindy
and
Nielsen
hopefully address
also
them.
knows my whole file. I would have bought in papers with me, except
Okay.
it's about 8 boxes, but I can email you all of the documents.
Okay. All right, thank you.
But I'm sure I don't need to speak to her unless she can approve my out-of-district placement or reimbursement for the tuition that I've already paid, which is $55,000 per student each year. So this year, we're on another $110,000 accruing.
Thank you, Ms. Hilaire. And Ms. Nielsen will speak to you in the back and get further information from
Can
you.
I add
Thank
one more
you.
thing?
Just one more?
Just one more.
Okay, thank you.
There was a student at the Henderson School that the other parents complained about, said that he was disrupting the class. That child got an out-of-district placement when the parent didn't request it.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Carolyn Kane, and she'll be followed by Marie McIsaac and Susan Levy.
Good evening, Ms. Kane.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Kane. I'm the chair of Boston Sped Pack. I know I have a loud voice, so I don't need to get too close to the microphone. So I'm here this evening to just make a few brief comments and an additional comment based on some of the materials that were outside this evening. I want to first thank Michael O'Neill for being the chair of the Boston School Committee for a great number of years. But more importantly, I want to thank him as the chair of Boston Sped Pack and on behalf of the entire Sped Pack community for his commitment, for his willingness to listen to us, to hear our concerns, and to take action where appropriate to assist our students. I think that he has been an incredible leader, one that we have valued greatly. And Mr. Lecanto, you have some pretty big shoes to fill. I think you're up to the task, and I look forward to supporting you in that role. But again, I cannot overstate our appreciation for Mr. O'Neill, and that was one of the reasons that I made sure to come here this evening, because I know there is a changing of the guard. And I also want to congratulate Mr. Lecanto. I've also had a very good working relationship with him on behalf of Sped Pack, and I know that Mr. O'Neill's mentorship will be well taken by Mr. Lecanto, particularly in the area of special education. I think you know that I will insist on that. So I look forward to working with you and the rest of the school committee and the administration as we move forward. With regard to the issue of the start and stop times, I'm very appreciative that the district heard the voices of so many families. I myself can say that I spent more than 12 hours in meetings with BPS the few weeks immediately preceding Christmas. And I think that it's very gratifying to know that the parents coming together and rallying together certainly brought about a change in direction, maybe not in the long term, but certainly in the short term. What I would say is that communication on any policy on the go forward regarding that issue needs to happen early and often, and that sharing information not just about potential benefits that may occur, but the potential adverse impacts needs to be equally shared. I don't think that there was an understanding, certainly by myself and the members that participated in our meetings, but what we heard from other parents as well. It really bothers me how much the whole issue itself adversely impacted the district's relationships with families. We have worked incredibly hard in SPEDPAC, and certainly in my tenure and before me, over 8 years to get parents re-engaged. And I think that some harm has done to those relationships, but relationships have ups and downs, and certainly relationships can be improved and strengthened. And I think the most important aspect of improving that relationship and solidifying that relationship is by communication. And I think that we heard that from parents. And, you know, I represent the students of special education, 11,000 or just under that in BPS. And certainly we heard from those parents, but I think the issue is that we heard also from a lot of general ed parents. And we need both sides to bring us together as a school community, and certainly to continue inclusion. I know I'm up, Ms. Sullivan, but I'm going to take a little leeway here. The other issue that I just wanted to touch upon is that the universal pre-K is up for presentation this evening. I will not be staying for your whole meeting. Thank you very much. But I did want to mention that under the law, that programs exist for children with special education eligibility who are 3 and 4 years old. So those are the children that are first and foremost entitled to those seats legally. And I would ask the district to be mindful of that legal responsibility as we move forward with the universal pre-K initiative. I applaud the mayor and the administration for making that a priority, because I do think it impacts all children and benefits all children. But in moving forward with that, we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, which is to not make sure that we have inclusion seats for children that are 3 and 4 who are entering the district throughout the school year and not going through the regular assignment process. We've had an inclusion task force that was instituted under Mr. O'Neill's leadership, thank you very much, and that continues today as a working group. And what we know is that we have culturally and linguistically diverse special education population in the city of Boston, and those students who are 3 and 4 years old are entitled to those pre-K seats and to be serviced along with their non-disabled peers in the least restrictive environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kane, and thank you for your partnership with SPEDPAC and the district and your service on the State Autism Committee as well. Ms. Sullivan.
Our next speaker is Marie McIsaac, and she'll be followed by Susan Levy and Anna Tavares. Is Ms. Isaac here? Is Ms. Levy here? Okay. Anna Tavares. And she'll be followed by John Mudd.
Good evening, Ms. Tavares.
Good evening, school committee members and Superintendent Chang. I'll be reading some comments to you in support of the Muñiz Academy proposal that will be shared later this evening. Tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of the Hernandez School community, the Sarah Greenwood School community, and the Hurley School community when offering support toward the Muñiz Academy Innovation School proposal. Our dual language schools are united in our mission to offer English learners a dual language model that also supports learning to all students across our great city. The approval of the proposal would have a positive impact on all of our school communities. For example, the opportunity for additional elementary seats in dual language schools. The proposal is also aligned to our united commitment to culturally and linguistically sustaining practices across our schools and furthering our students' access to an exemplary arts model. We collectively support this proposal and look forward to planning ahead in creating a strong and viable dual language pipeline for many students across our district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Varas.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Mudd, and he'll be followed by Cecilia Sariano and Bob Goodman.
John Mudd, advocate. I'm usually here in my role as a critic, but I think it's important to keep people guessing a little bit sometimes and to be willing to show some appreciation where it's due. And I wanted to join with others and make some brief comments, thanking Michael O'Neill for his really deep commitment and incredible service through many, many years, and really insisting on keeping the students and children in the system at the forefront of any discussion. I especially appreciate your willingness to ask the tough questions, especially on the toughest of issues like the budget, but in many other areas as well. I think at this time in our history, it's really important to note that you recognize the importance of showing respect for the school committee and the office of the chair as an institution. This is especially important at a time in our country where we have leadership that models disrespect for institutions and a willingness to undermine them impulsively and capriciously. And you are the opposite of that. And connected to this is your ability to handle challenges to the institution with dignity. Again, in contrast to others, which we see in front of us. Finally, your tenacity in trying to institutionalize a commitment to the values of parent and student engagement by systematically asking school leaders about their school's representation on the Citywide Parents Council, the SPEDPAC, and BSAC. Of course, despite all the praise, you know, and we all know, the job isn't done. And you would be the first to recognize that. And I'll spare you the long lecture, but the short course of issues that I think are crucial now are still the achievement gap. We have an equity statement, but I think that there is a need for the committee to probe much more deeply into how the proposals that come before you will in fact reduce the opportunity and achievement gaps. Secondly, connected to this is the whole issue of human capital and personnel. How can the school committee contribute to and insist on more progress in the ethnic, linguistic, and cultural diversity of our teachers so that they reflect the diversity of our students? And finally, in this little list, professional development. You know, this has been underappreciated, underinvested. I've seen a recent list of a course catalog, which is remarkable in its breadth. The question in my head is it deep enough? Finally, I look forward to working with you and your successor, Michael Acanto, the other members of the committee, the superintendent, as a critical and I hope respectful friend and advocate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mudd.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cecilia Sariano. She'll be followed by Bob Goodman and Dan Abramowski.
Good evening, and thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be able to have the opportunity to address Dr. Chang and the rest of the members of the Boston Public School Committee. I am here to express my support for the Margarita Muñiz Academy expansion renewal. I have had in my professional life the very good fortune of working in many schools throughout the country, not only in Boston, but in Santa Monica, California, and in Denver, Colorado. I have had an opportunity to see a lot of approaches to having engagement and achievement from students. All of the schools have been very good schools. Some, in fact, very fine schools. But I am delighted to say that in my career, the Margarita Muñiz Academy is the best school I've ever been in. The dedication, intentionality, and commitment of the leadership and the teachers to the students' needs is something I've never seen before to this extent. The students feel acknowledged, respected, listened to, supported, and as a result, there is a culture of a desire for academic excellence and achievement in this school. It is something that is unanimous no matter which classroom you go into and which student you speak with. Now, they're all teenagers, don't get me wrong, but the engagement and the common approach to success, not only in this present environment, but in their future, is unanimous. The teachers and the administration work together as a team with the students to be able to understand what their needs are and to find the solutions to getting to those needs. The students feel comfortable, supported. The teachers are given an opportunity to learn leadership, and there is a modeling going around throughout the entire school. The teachers model the administration, the students model the teachers. It is a pleasure to be there, and I look forward to having this be accepted by the school committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sariano.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bob Goodman, and he'll be followed by Dan Abramowski.
Thank you. Good evening to members of the school committee, and wanted to echo earlier testimonies and thanking Michael O'Neill for his dedicated service as chair and over many, many years. I am a parent at the Mission Hill School, and we've been with the school. My son's been there since K2, including kind of at the time of relocation. I wanted to say that the co-location policies of co-locating schools, as you know, the Margarita Muniz and Mission Hill School are co-located at the former Agassiz building, is a challenge because the school, it's just natural that even schools with good faith and collaborative efforts, there winds up being kind of overlapping space needs, which is unfortunate. I think that I'm just supportive of the Muniz mission and their proposal. I also want to state that for Mission Hill School, this proposal will raise questions about the location and facilities needs. In the case of Mission Hill School, just want to make it clear that the relocation from kind of the Roxbury Mission Hill area to Jamaica Plain was challenging, a period of great flux. The school is now kind of firmly on its feet and draws a lot of support from Jamaica Plain, and in addition, this is not necessarily how to put this. This is actually in no way to detract from the importance of the Muniz mission. It's just that at the time of the relocation and since then, BPS affirmed by then acting superintendent John McDonough in 2015. I'm happy to share the letter that it was envisioned that the school, the Mission Hill School, would stay there, and an appropriate facility for the Muniz alternate one would be found starting in the 2016-2017 school year. That didn't happen. I don't believe there was a facility that worked for the Muniz, and the co-location continues. Anyway, I just urge the school committee to find a solution that makes sense, but from my perspective as a parent, it wouldn't make sense to uproot the Mission Hill School K0 to 8 again in order to obtain this this laudable goal. There should be an alternative facility. Ideally, since to my mind, that works well for Muniz, and I know that Muniz also feels very rooted in Jamaica Plain. Ideally, it would be, near their current facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Dan Abramowski.
Hey, my name is Dan Abramowski, and I am the assistant principal at Margarita Muniz Academy. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Chang and members of the school committee for their partnership over the past 6 years as we've grown what I think is a really unique school. I want to highlight a little bit what makes us unique and then ask for your partnership as we continue to innovate and expand over the next 5 years. So in this time, we have become an open enrollment, dual language district high school with a focus on arts and expeditionary learning. And I think a lot of that is very unique. And all of that serves our mission of preparing all students for college and career. And we are well on our way to realizing that mission. This year alone, we have 25 students in a medical interpreting class who will graduate as certified medical interpreters. We have 2 students who are receiving $200,000 each from the Posse Foundation to attend competitive private colleges. We have students who are going to jumpstart their career through Year Up or Youth Build, students who will enroll in UMass Boston Honors College, and students who will take advantage of Boston Bridge to start at Bunker Hill and graduate tuition-free from 4 years from the UMass system. So we've come a long way in building a high school that meets the needs of a wide range of students and prepares all of them for college and for career. We're asking to continue this innovation and for your support as we expand not only to 7th and 8th grade, but beyond 12th grade. Our vision is 7 through 14, that we welcome any student who comes to our door in 7th grade, put them on a path to college and career, but we continue that support after they graduate. We are committed to building a program that provides alumni support in the 2 years after high school graduation so that more students can realize their goals of college graduation and career readiness and career opportunities. I think the opportunity that our innovation plan represents would really allow us to deepen the work we've already started and to expand opportunities for all our students and for all students in BPS. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Locanto, that concludes our speakers for general public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Our first action item this evening is the consent calendar, which consists of first grants for approval totaling $855,360, and 3 international travel requests for the Boston Latin School. At this time, I'd like to open it up to questions from the committee. Well, thank you. Hearing none, I want to move on, and I want to note that both Dr. Coleman and Ms. Oliver Davila have asked to abstain from 3 of tonight's grants to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. So for that reason, we're going to pull out those grants from the consent calendar and vote on them separately by roll call. Are there any questions for discussion?
I just have one quickie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you,
Yeah,
Ms.
it's just one,
Bravo.
I have one question about the Culture and Climate Change in Nicaragua for English Language Learners program that is buying books. So my question only is, will those books be available to students beyond this 1 year? It says mostly for students who are in dual language programs, but the question is, would they be available to other students who are learning Spanish, who are not in those programs beyond the first year of this project?
I believe the answer is yes, but Priya, do you want to elaborate or? What? Come on.
Did you have a question?
Books boxes and donation from the Boston University College. As of right now, there's no plans yet because we haven't received the books yet, but they are planning to publish the books, and then after the first year, we do plan on expanding it, and hopefully in partnership with the Boston University, we'll be receiving more books, so it's expanding more than just the dual language schools.
Ms. Alverdala, did you have another question?
Not for you guys. My question is for the college and career ready grants. I realize that they are with different partners and different colleges, but my question is, I just wonder, it's a small pot of money for planning, but I wonder if there are opportunities, maybe they're already happening, but I'm just curious, are there opportunities where the schools are actually working together across high schools around this? Because it would seem like so many grants, and really the end game really is to have the dual enrollment and all of that. So I'm just wondering if that's happening already.
So I can't necessarily speak to whether or not schools are working together. I know because it's a designation from the state, schools are doing it, the grant applications individually. I know there were other schools who applied so the planning grant moves you are automatically moved to the next stage of the designation process. But there were also schools who were not granted the planning grant, but are eligible to apply for the larger grant and were moved to the next process as well, stage of the process. So there will be at least one more in addition to these two, possibly two more applying for the larger overall grant. And that's something that I can work with the instructional superintendents on, and if there's sort of collaboration and coordination amongst the schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be great, because I think that's how we get into these silos of, and I realize it's different partners in different schools, but I think also sharing across all the high schools who don't have the opportunity to also get this grant, whatever best practices, et cetera. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yes, sir. Were there other questions or discussion? Okay. So as I mentioned, we do need to pull out a few of the grants for the vote tonight. And so I want to entertain first a motion to approve the Culture and Climate Change in Nicaragua for English Language Learners grant with an estimated value of $12,500. Is there a motion? Ms. Robinson, second from Mr. O'Neill. Is there any discussion or objection? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Oliver Davila?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Ms. Jerry Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Abstain.
Mr. Lecanto?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'll entertain another motion to approve the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Emergency Support Grant in the amount of $5,000. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there any discussion or objection? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Oliver Davila?
Abstain.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Ms. Jerry Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Lecanto?
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you. Now I will entertain a motion to approve the Title III English Language Acquisition and Academic Achievement Program for English Learners and Immigrant Children and Youth Grant in the amount of $308,360. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, and that's a second from Mr. O'Neill. Is there any discussion or objection? Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Oliver Davila?
Abstain.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Ms. Jerry Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill? Excuse me, Mr. Lecanto?
Yes.
That's my one mess up. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Ms. Sullivan. And finally, I want to entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar, which consists of the remaining grants totaling $529,500 and 3 international travel requests for the Boston Latin School. Is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Ms. Oliver Davila. Second from Ms. Robinson. Is there any discussion or objection? Is there any objection to approving the motion by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the consent calendar is approved. Okay, we'll move on to our first presentation now, the Margarita Muñiz Academy Innovation Renewal. At this time, I want to ask Headmaster Danya Vasquez to please step forward with her presentation. But first, I'd like to invite the superintendent to give any opening remarks.
Thank you so much. The Margarita Muñiz Academy is requesting approval for its full innovation proposal. Earlier this school year, the school did get approval for its autonomies. Now the school was asking for full approval of its entire plan. The innovation plan is required to be approved by the school committee. This is per Department of Elementary and Secondary Education regulations. This is a school I have visited several times in my time in Boston. It is the only dual language high school in New England. I've been always impressed with its innovative practices, its focus around the arts. Obviously, young people who come to the Margarita Muniz are learning in 2 languages. I've come to learn that not all the students do speak both languages coming in. So the young people are not only learning to basically pick up the social aspects of the language, but also the academic aspects of the language. Lastly, what you will hear tonight is the school's desire to become a 712 high school. We know that they so desire to do so at this time, given facilities concerns and facilities restrictions. The school can't go to 712. So as part of this Build BPS process, our goal is to hopefully find facility solution so the school can go 712 in the future. But at this time, we can't find that solution. So we're asking for the school committee to vote on its plan, but fully understand that we cannot implement the 712 model until we have a facility solution. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Danya to take us through this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chang, and thank you to all of you. Michael, you were on school committee when I did the first presentation back in 2011, and so we've been through a long journey, and I really want to thank everybody for their support and lots of conversations to think this through as we continue the next 5 years. So let's make sure I can do this right. I'm just going to do an overview of what our plan consists of, and then some key ideas for you to take away with, and I'm sure you have questions for me. And then Dr. Chang has sort of already told us what some of the next steps moving forward are, but I'm sure we'll get to that at the end of the presentation. Our school has been framed to foster innovation. It was designed as a laboratory for thinking about some new ideas. And the big new idea was being a dual language high school. We had, and of course we're an outgrowth of the Hernandez and the other dual language schools, the Hurley, the Sarah Greenwood, and there are sister schools. And so we took this innovation up to the high school level. That's really the core of who we are. And I also want to say that the innovation that we're driving is not just in service to the Muniz Academy community, but it's actually in service to the whole district and Boston. We are a lab, and we've learned a lot over these last 5 years. So as Dr. Chang said, we are here before you 6 years later, to ask for the next 5 years of approval of our innovation plan, which really consists of many parts, as required by the state. You did approve our autonomies until we were able to get to this point, so it was like a little bridge, and I want to be clear about that, but we are at this important moment to look ahead and approve this plan, hopefully. Yes, the proposal has a part of it, and a very strong part of it, that thinks about adding a 7th and 8th grade, and I'll speak to why we think that's important as part of our next 5 years. This proposal would carry us through June of 2023, which seems far away, but it really isn't far away, because when I sat before Michael back in 2011, I wouldn't have imagined I'd be sitting here in front of you once again, asking for something for our next 5 years. We are dedicated, as you heard some of our speakers earlier say, to educating our students, getting them ready for career and college in a model that requires doing it in both languages. And so it's really a very complex model that we've learned to establish over all these years. But we are beginning to see the fruits of really hard labor, hard thinking, and collaboration, because we haven't done this by ourselves. We've done this with a lot of support. District, other schools, other folks. It's been really a very collaborative effort. I want to say a little bit, though many of you know our school, I think it's important to just sort of kind of review at a glance who we are and what we're doing. At full enrollment, we're at 300 students. Actually, today we're at 310. We're at grades college prep, dual language for grades 9 through 12. 83% of our students are English language learners, and they represent 12 different countries. 40% are over age. Project-based learning, the arts, technology are all part of a very integrated focus in our school. 2016 was our first graduating class, and many of you were there, and that was really fun and exciting, and I thank you for that. And we had another graduating class. Amazingly, we have a third one coming up. I didn't know I would be saying that back in 2011, Michael. You probably have this in front of you, and folks behind me can see some of our statistics, our data, our progress, which is fairly strong. We still have a lot of work to do. We're not in a place where I don't think we'll ever be completely and always satisfied like we arrived. We'll always find places to improve, science being one area to improve. And yet, given our first 5 years, we've shown some pretty strong progress in math, in literacy, in our graduation rate, and even students who are still engaged post-graduation, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Some of our accomplishments that I think are worthy to note and that we will continue to forward in this next 5 years. We are the only high school, I think in the state, that offers a seal of biliteracy to our graduating seniors. And students have to earn this. It's not just because they've been at Muniz Academy. We have criteria they have to meet. And that criteria includes advanced or proficient on MCAS. They have to take AP Spanish, the exam. They have to present a senior portfolio in both languages. And they have to affirm in their coursework in both languages that they are have a level of biliteracy. So it's pretty rigorous, and actually not every student earns the seal. Majority do, because it's that rigorous. We have project-based learning, which has produced a document that you all have from, I believe it was 2 years ago. Attendance would be 100%, student proposals for high school redesign in Boston. I think, Dr. Chang, it was your first year as superintendent. And I think people are still looking at that document for ideas, because it was student voice that was telling us what we need to think about. We have a very vibrant arts program. I like to say we're a really small school with a really big arts program. Every student is engaged in the arts every day, 100% of our students. We're a Grammy Signature Schools Enterprise Award recipient in 2015. That was at the end of our 3rd year as a school, and we were amazed that we were, recognized as a Grammy Signature School. We know that this year we got the happy email that Naviance has finally been figured out for all our BPS schools. We've been engaged with Naviance. This is our 2nd year, and it has been a worthy effort. But we've been piloting that a little ahead of perhaps the broader district. But I'm happy that our other colleagues are going to be using it as well. As you heard earlier, we have, actually this is our 3rd POSSE Scholar. We had a POSSE Scholar not last year, but the year before, and 2 this year. We were a bit miffed that we didn't get it last year. As I said, we have senior portfolio for all our seniors. It's part of our graduation requirement. We've also piloted our first senior internships. So we had a core of seniors who participated in internships during the May month of just before graduation, and we want to continue to expand that. And actually, one of our students was an intern here at BPS. We have our 9th through 11th graders participate in what we call the Achievement Zone, the Zona de Logros, where we do a day of exhibitions. And we actually do that almost towards the end of the year, like June 15th, because it's our way of keeping our kids engaged. You see there on the screen, and I don't know if you see it in front of you, school committee members, the different colleges that we have that our students are currently at. There are many more that they have been accepted in, but this is just a list of where students are going. 73% of our seniors are still engaged in their post-graduation plans, which is pretty remarkable, and that's because we've already begun to roll out and innovate an alumni support program that really follows them for 2 years post-graduation. We have kids coming almost every day, graduates, for some reason. I think I've told the story where we've had kids come in when they have their books, their math books, and I say, well, what are you doing here with your math book and your notebook? And, well, I'm going to see such a teacher because I need some help with math. And they've graduated. And so they still know they can come back to Muniz Academy for support. So we're always happy to see our kids come back. Our strategies for success include really this idea of innovation status. I am very confident to say to you that without having had the original approval and hopefully this approval, we would not be able to create the kind of really unique and different school that we have. It is because we have innovation status that we're able to create what we have. It allows us the flexibilities, working in partnership with the district and others, to create something unique. So that innovation status is really important. The dual language instructional model, our kids are getting double dose of language and literacy. I think that has a lot to do and is reflected in the progress data. Knowing students well, I think I know almost the name of every student and a lot of stories. By the end of this year, I'll know a lot of their stories, if not almost all of their stories. And that's true of me, and that's true of staff and other administrators. We know our students well. Expeditionary learning continues to be a commitment. As I said, the postgraduate alumni support, and a very active professional learning community. We really learn together. Sometimes we struggle together in what we need to learn about, but we're a very active community as learners. So it's not just our students are learning, the teachers are learning, I'm learning. So what do we want to do in the next 5 years? If that's what sort of the terrain that we've covered, the next 5 years, we want to deepen the following. Our dual language work, we're still learning how to do this well. Expeditionary learning, we still want to learn how to do that even better. Instructional strategies, the arts, and of course to continue our innovation status. How do you use that really well to the full advantage for every student? Key areas of focus in the next 5 years will be intensive focus on math and language literacy, and also a focus on executive functioning skills. Raíces, those are our school values and mindset. We've already begun to do some of this work. The opportunity of writing the proposal was a really great opportunity, hard to do, but a great opportunity because it made us think about, well, you know, what do we need to think about the next 5 years? And although you haven't approved the proposal, some of those core ideas and those first 2 bullet points are things that we're already working on because they're really important. Continue to improve our graduation rate. Leverage we've started evidence-based argumentation. This is our 2nd year as a debate league school, and it's been really powerful. We want to strengthen that and really continue to be part of the bilingual debate league. Establish an intergenerational 826 writers room. This is a dream. I know that the Hernandez has begun their writers room, and we've talked about with folks at 826, wouldn't it be great to have a writer's room at Muniz Academy and sort of link it with the Hernandez School and do something that's intergenerational in terms of writing and telling our stories. Deepen our college and career work, and then finally expand to a 712 model. I want to say a little bit of why a 712 model is important and how it meshes and where the inspiration came. The inspiration came from all of you and from Dr. Chang, to be honest with you, and the work the district is doing around grade configuration. And so we took on that challenge. We were willing to think about that. we believe that we want to support and culturally and linguistically sustainable practices. We think that we know, and again, this is all in the planning, that we could increase dual language seats in BPS at our school, but across the elementary schools as well. That will need the further conversations included in Bill BPS, et cetera, as Dr. Chang has mentioned. We offer an opportunity for expeditionary learning in action, another interest area of the district. And of course, we offer an exemplary arts program, again, something the district has supported over many years. One thing that we know, and in our expected outcomes, one of the other reasons why I do this is that we're trying to teach kids in 4 years, and sometimes less, because we do welcome kids in 10th and 11th grade. So sometimes we have fewer than 4 years to really do a full dual language model. And as Dr. Chang noted, yeah, some of our kids come, they don't know any English, some kids don't know any Spanish. And we have to work some magic in there in a really short amount of time to get them to that, not just college and career, but to a place of biliteracy. And so we just need more time. Research tells us that we need more time. You learn a language in 5 to 7 years, and sometimes we're trying to do this in 2. And so that was part of the impetus, too, in thinking about how do we do dual language better in our current model? What do we need to deepen in our current model? And what would happen if we had a couple more years with kids? And what would happen if we then also, on the other end of it, became a 714, do the additional years of following students and supporting them, because most of our kids, 95% of our kids, are first generation to go to college. So we know we have to do that alumni support piece. More time for the arts, deeper focus on, as I said, college and career readiness. And I'm interested in doing more collaboration with the district and being a lab where we can welcome. We get lots of visitors, but we get visitors from outside the district. And I think it's time for us to think about how do we open our doors to our district colleagues for more collaboration to learn what we're doing, and so that we can learn from others as well. So, I really want to thank you again to hear our plan, our proposal, a lot of appreciation. I know it presents some complexity, as always. Innovation is about complexity in many ways, and it is about taking risks. And so we've taken the risk these first 5 years. We want to keep taking those risks. We want to keep being out front and innovating on behalf of our students, but on behalf of BPS and all of the district. To continue to deepen our model. So I want to thank you and open for any of your questions.
All right, thank you very much, Headmaster Vasquez. Excuse me. And before I open it up for questions and comments from my fellow committee members, I do want to just stress and reiterate, first, thank you for being clear about your intentions with respect to expanding to a 7 to 12 model, and thank you to Superintendent Chang for his comments prior to the presentation, specifically related to how all of that is contingent on the Build BPS facility solutions. I do want to note for folks that maybe didn't have the chance to join us after midnight on it was December 15th, when we did talk about grade configurations, excuse me, in the committee. We did make clear that any changes to grade configurations in individual schools would come before this body for a vote prior to implementation. And so our vote on the implementation, the innovation plan that you are presenting for us today is separate and distinct from the vote to change your school or any other related schools' grade configurations.
Understood.
So with that, I'll open it up to members' questions. Ms. Robinson.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I was interested in hearing a little bit more about the pipeline. So for the 3 schools now that are dual language schools, are they K-8 schools, or are they all K-8?
Yeah, they're all K-8 schools, and if it's okay for me to sort of elaborate on this a little bit, my colleagues and I have all talked about over a number of years now. One of the challenges that they face, which is not unusual for K-8s, is that they lose lots of kids and their 7th and 8th grades shrink. And so, and we've also talked about their desire and the district's need to have more seats at the elementary level. And so this is kind of an elegant solution that could really solve a few of those issues, not just for Muniz Academy, but for the district in some ways. So we're thinking about it more broadly. So they are willing and interested to go K-6. So they would need to come before the body too, because they would have grade configuration changes. And we would, over a process of a couple of years, as we roll out, assume the 7th and 8th grade populations. And there may be other situations where, we would have to look at the full enrollment and where all of our students would be coming in, but they would be classes of 80, a 7th grade of 80. And so those have been the conversations over 3 or 4 years, actually. So it's an opportunity for Muniz Academy to have students with us more time so we can really complete the work in a way that we know research tells us and we know just from practice tells us that we need. But it also gives those schools an opportunity to reconfigure and add seats where we need them. And I think it's a kind of a win-win, but we all know that the facilities question, Bill BPS question, is really the space where we need to really come together and think hard. But that is really the impetus, but it's been an impetus even before you folks started talking about grade configuration. It's been a long conversation.
What percentage of kids from those schools now show up in your 9th grade?
So for example, this year from the Hernandez, I think they had less than 25 kids that they graduated in 8th grade, and we captured about half of their kids. And the Hurley has a really small population. We capture maybe 2 or 3 of their students. Students have lots of really great choices, obviously. And so there are lots of conversations to be had around what this would mean in terms of an opportunity. We become another opportunity at the 7th grade, is part of the thinking. Yeah.
And during the time while you're sort of waiting for this to happen, and there are still 7th and 8th grades, is there opportunity to work differently with the 7th and 8th graders so that as they would make the transition, some of the things that you're talking about, needing more time to have accomplished, students are actually getting the benefit of some of those opportunities while they're...
Right. Well, they continue to have their opportunities in the 7th and 8th grade at the dual language schools. I also have talked to a number of our parents, obviously, at Muniz Academy, and I've asked them, is this a good idea? And to a parent, they have said to me, if Muniz Academy had started at 7th grade, and these are parents who didn't have their kids at the Hernandez or the Hurley or the dual language schools. These are parents who are coming from other schools. They said, we definitely would have started at 7th grade with you. And so I think there's a pool of parents and families that would be attracted to our school at that grade level. And what we offer then is a less transition for some of our kids who might have gone to a middle school and then to high school. So again, that's another positive that we think would potentially be an outcome of this kind of move. Yeah.
What would you think your overall goal would be for total school population?
Yeah, so probably 475, 480. I think that would be reasonable if we're adding 80 students, 160 students to our current 300, 310. I think somewhere between 475, 480 would probably be really reasonable to consider. I think it would, and I could be made wrong on this point, I think it would be harder to be bigger, much bigger than that. We don't conceive of ourselves as a 1,000-kid school that really pushes, doing a dual language model. It's very complicated. If I tried to explain our scheduling, I'd need a few hours. So, we still believe in small, but we think we can do this at that level, that sort of, hitting the ceiling. But again, I could be wrong.
Yeah. My last question is about the issue of ages, as you would be thinking about in the future, adding the 7th and 8th graders and currently having 40% of your students being over age. How would that work or change?
That's a really great question. And I've talked to other colleagues who have 7 through 12s. We do have some of them in the district. And 7th graders are really different from 12th graders. And we have some kids who are, over age in different grade, in all different grades. I think in the end of the day, it's really about the kind of community that you build. It's about the culture that you build. So one thing that staff have started at the school, and it's proving to be very successful, is that we have a group of peer leaders in grade 12. And these are not the students who are all sort of, pulling the 4.0s. It's a real mix of students, on purpose, real diverse group of students. And they are peer leaders in the school, and they regularly go down to the 9th grade, and they lead their crew or advisory times, and they actually tell the teachers they have to leave, and they do a really good job. And so we've seen students mentor each other. I've seen 10th grade students mentoring, 9th grade students in math. So I think it's possible. I think that, we have some learning to do from our colleagues in 7 through 12s, because they do programming and some of the academics differently for their younger students, because that should be different. And so we would need, and in our plan, we do consider that. But I think there's much more for us to learn and consider as we start with younger students. But I think we have some front runners ahead of us where we can learn. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Mr. McClay?
Oh, all right. So just want to know, do you know who your BSAC reps are for your school?
Yes, we do. We have 8 students. This year, I have to say, our students decided that they wanted to have an egalitarian student government, and they did not want to have a president, vice president, etc. They decided, and this was out of conversations from last year, that they wanted students to be represented, so they have 2 representatives for each grade, and those students are co-equal in the school in terms of their representation. I don't know where they got that idea from, but I think it's a good idea, and I supported it. And so we had the elections, actually, we were delayed for a variety of reasons. And so we're going to be meeting again on Monday so they can begin to come to the BSAC meetings. And there could be a rotation of students who can participate in the BSAC meetings. I believe last year, Stefanica Janvier was one of our students who was at the BSAC meetings, and she had a great time. But you might be seeing more than 1 or 2 students from Muñiz Academy. You might see a rotation of our students because they really feel strongly about an egalitarian model of government.
Well, again, yeah, you can send as many students as you want, and we do meet on Mondays at 4 here in the Bowling Building. Just a reminder.
Yeah, you'll see them.
All right, and also speaking to the age difference, like Ms. Robertson did, I still will imagine, even though you do have students that serve in mentor or leadership positions, if I'm a parent coming in middle school grade levels around 7th and 8th grade, I think there will still be some concern from a parent looking at overage students being at 40%. And just something about the culture, no matter how you say it, it'll still be like a red flag for parents, I would.
Actually, we have schools that are 7-12, and they probably might recognize that they have overage students in their schools as well, and they work well. So we have Tech Boston, maybe not in the exam schools, but we have other 7-12 schools. And so we also have K-8 schools. So you have kids who are 14 and 15 with kids who are 2 and 3 years old in the same building. So we have lots of models where we have a wide age range of students, and we do those well. And so I don't really think that the age should be as much of a worry. I really think it's about the culture in the building and the expectations and how you set a community that works with each other regardless of your differences, whether they are linguistic differences, age, race, class, culture. That's really what's more important. And so kids talk less about, they really don't focus on their ages in our school. If you came to our school tomorrow, you wouldn't really hear kids saying, oh, he's 18 and he's 14. They don't really talk that way. And there are actually some 14-year-olds that are really mature. And 15-year-olds who are really, really mature. So we have wide age ranges in schools. So I don't think that really is a worry. I think it's more about the culture and the community. Yeah, but it's reasonable.
Yeah.
It's reasonable to ask, and something that I think our families would reasonably ask, but we're prepared.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McClay. Mr. O'Neill, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Headmaster Vasquez, thank you. Okay, you know I have been a huge supporter of your school since day one, and love the fact that you have the first graduating class with the seal of biliteracy, not only in Massachusetts, but in New England. And it's now been enshrined in law in Massachusetts, so that's wonderful to see. I do have a couple of questions and comments. The first is, do you have a full written plan on the innovation? Because we just have a
Yes.
PowerPoint here.
Yes, we do.
Okay, if we could make sure that is provided to us, please, because I
Yes,
actually
absolutely.
would like to read it, and
Absolutely.
that
Yeah,
hasn't
yeah.
come to us. The next couple of comments are actually more directed towards the superintendent. Superintendent and your team, words matter, and written words really matter. And so we had a presentation on December 6th that talked about a potential look at grade configuration. And you and your team very specifically said that we're going to have a dual model in this city, or that you are moving towards, that is K to 6, 7 through 12, and K to 8, 9 through 12. We have a lot of parents and school communities that have fought very hard for K to 8s, and we're very respectful of this on this committee. And yet, in front of us are two documents that 3 times say BPS is moving to a 7 to 12 model, and never once talk about 9 through 12 and K to 8s. And I think it's critical that these documents be corrected to reflect that that you are proposing and you're focused in on a variety of models. And yes, we don't want 20 grade configurations, but we are not just moving to a 7 to 12 model. And I think it's critical that these documents reflect that, because people pay attention to these. And when we, a month ago, said that we were going to be K to 6, predominantly K to 6, 7 through 12, and K to 8, 9 through 12, that has to be reflected in every document in front of us. Third is, and again, Headmaster Vasquez, as I said, a lot of this doesn't affect you, is not directed at you, but
Oh, no, I understand.
It does affect you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think very highly of your school, and you know I do. I also think very highly of the Mission School.
Mm-hmm.
And you are in the same situation that BCLA and New Mission High School is, that ACC and Green used to be, that Fenway and BAA used to be. And as my parents said about 35 years ago, cohabitation doesn't work. And unfortunately, we're in a situation right now. Not that I ever thought of it, but as we are unfortunately have put school, we have not intentionally and not with malicious intent, but several times across this district, we have pitted schools against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really uncomfortable with the situation where the success of one hurts another school. And so it is alluded to in here, and Chairman Lecanto and Superintendent Chang, you alluded to it verbally, but I actually am uncomfortable with an innovation plan that calls out for expansion, particularly in the numbers that you're talking about, where, let's be clear, you would need a full building to make that happen. And whether it's that or whether it's another, it will impact Mission. And I honestly feel that that problem needs to be solved before I would be comfortable supporting an innovation plan that specifically calls out for the expansion. And again, this is please understand, this is speaking from experience of a year ago, New Mission came forward and said, we want to expand to 7 and 8. And then BCLA said, whoa, what's going on here? We hadn't been talked with, and we haven't even talked yet about conversations with Mission K to 8. And how does that school community feel about it? And is there room in the building, or would it mean that one of the two would have to leave? These are serious critical issues that I think have to be solved. I don't want to stop your innovation plan. Again, I'm a huge fan of the school.
I know.
Dual language is critical. We are supporting it there. We're supporting it across the district. We want to keep growing it. I do get concerned when I hear the numbers of 7th and 8th grade in Hernandez and others. But I'm deeply concerned about something that implicitly or unintentionally, and I've always talked about unintentional consequences, the unintentional consequences of this plan that says we're going to move to 7 and 8 eventually when Build BPS is solved. If your child goes to Mission, 5 years ago, that was in the Mission Hill community, and I unfortunately have been on here in a while, and that was really, really hard to move that. And as was pointed out to us earlier today, Mr. McDonough did send a letter several years ago saying we need to solve this problem. And we got to go back and read that letter and think hard about promises that have been made to communities. And we can't be pitting communities against each other until we solve the facility problem.
Can I allay some of your concerns as your?
Please do.
Yeah.
I think, and I've been out with you.
Yes, you have.
And met with you and
Yep.
Superintendent Chang
Yep.
and the principal of Mission K-8 and the board chairs
Sure.
on each, and we
No, you've
toured the
done a lot of
building
work with
together.
us.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
You've been a great partner in helping us navigate the complexities, which, in fact, historically were not, never from any negative intention, but sort of how things got constructed over time. I think the proposal was really an impetus, right? We're excited about, and we've been excited about this opportunity. And so we wanted to put it together with an innovation proposal that we have to do every 5 years. There's more in that proposal than just, as I described. It is, yes, you're going to read it and you're going to say, yes, this is very clearly in the proposal, but as I described, there's 3 big parts to that proposal. Deepen what we currently have, do the alumni support program, and as Dr. Chang had mentioned, and Mr. Locanto, Chairman Locanto, the 7th and 8th grade, that is a big part of the proposal. It is a big dream, but we're also very aware that it has to be in concert with some deep planning. I also remember conversations with Superintendent McDonough and with others and with you, that every school should be able to have its vision and sort of dream big, right? And continue to innovate. And so I feel strongly that that's what we did. We don't want to stop that process because a question that is very complicated isn't solved. And so I guess we took the approach to say, let's put this on the table, let's really try to think big, think out loud. What would it mean, right? Because if we don't go down the road of thinking about, well, what might this mean, we might never get to that sort of next space in innovation. And so, yeah, it is a challenge, it is a risk. For sure, we're not intending to cause harm to, other communities, but at the same time, we should all be allowed to think big and dream and innovate. Because then we could get to the questions. We might be able to arrive to that possibility. If we don't put it out on the table, then we're never gonna, it feels like it can never happen, right? Because we're being so overly cautious. The other thing that may allay you or others on the committee, because these are really important questions and I take them really seriously. So I've had a lot of conversations with district folks, as we were building, the plan, et cetera, and in the last few months. This wouldn't happen right away. We're not looking for 2018. Be great 2019 if it could happen, and in concert with Bill BPS, obviously. So there's a lot of work to do around that piece to get it right. And I think with you, I know I learned, what it means to cohabitate with another school, and what are the great parts of it, what are the hard parts about that. So I think that together, there's enough knowledge in this room and in others that are maybe behind me or in this building, that we can actually figure this out. And so the proposal before you, while I can understand your discomfort, is really one, because from the state perspective, I'm required to put out a proposal. I remember when I sat before you and maybe others in the room back in 2011, it was a pretty big risk to do a high school. And the question then was, we really need another high school? And the second question, a dual language high school? Well, who's done that? Why do we need that? Where are you going to get the kids? And so I feel like a little bit of deja vu of, back then I had the same hard questions, different ones, actually, but they were hard questions. And so you're asking new hard questions. But what happened back then, everybody took the risk and said, okay, we're going to, give this a shot. We're going to figure it out and give this a shot. And so that's what I'm asking for. I know they're the right hard questions. You should be asking them. And if we don't ask them, or if we don't put, at least endeavor in thinking out loud about the possibility, we might not get to the answers.
Right.
So I hope that allays or at least explains some of the thinking about why we're bringing
helpful.
this forward.
Mr. O'Neill, if I could, Superintendent wanted to make a few comments to further answer your questions first. If you would, thank you.
I want to first recognize your comment around just being very deliberate around language, and we will correct the language in here. We did state that the district prefers a K-8, 9, 12, K-6, 7, 12 system. So we will go ahead and change that language. There's two quick things. I actually asked Headmaster Dania Vasquez to put the idea of the 7-12 on paper for the interest of transparency. It's important to put it out there because I know that they so desire to go 7-12 instead of having a school committee vote on a plan that that is absent or is silent on that desire. I thought was not in the interest of transparency. So I actually asked them to put that on paper. And for us to be very clear that we're not going to increase the grade configuration of that school until the build BPS process. And the second thing is, I think in terms of co-locations, this is an issue that is difficult nationally. And it works in many, there are struggles in many places, but there are also places where it works wonderfully, where two schools come together and they share resources. Young people create cultures where they actually are building on each other. And this is one of those places where, while there have been challenges, we all had an opportunity to walk that campus together with both schools. And I thank the leadership of both those schools for making a co-location work. And we do not want to create any sort of tensions because of facilities, so that's why we're holding off on the expansion until we can find a facility solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Mr. O'Neill.
Yes, I do understand that, and thank you for clarifying that, Superintendent Chang. And yes, there are plenty of examples where it does work. The tension arises when one or both become very successful and both want to expand, and there's not the physical space to do it. And we've seen it play out in the past year at BCLA and New Mission High School, both successful schools, both being chosen, both would like the opportunity to expand, and now at least their New Mission had some room to expand. But it raised concerns by BCLA, and again, I want to get back to, I'm a huge supporter of your school. You know I am. Mm-hmm. This is a bigger issue about our facilities overall, and feeling terrible that you and the school leadership and the school community of Mission K-8 has been put in this situation. And so it's a problem we need to solve, not that you need to solve. However, words do matter, and to go back to the example that you gave, 5 years ago, you asked us to take a risk and try something new, and we supported it unanimously, and you have exceeded our wildest expectations. What we're potentially being set up to do now is to do something that we know causes problems, that we know has unintended consequences, and that's what I'm expressing concern over.
But
because of thinking of some other buildings where the same circumstances happened.
But it might not. I mean, I think we haven't proposed solutions at the moment, and so I would ask all of you, not just you, because you might be expressing sort of the concerns that others share, to actually hold off until we actually get around the table and try to solve this.
And so my concerns are not about Margarita Muñez Academy going to 7 through 12.
Mm-hmm.
I would absolutely love to see that. It has to be done in the context of having a facility solution that is not
We agree-
negatively
we agree
impacting
with you.
other schools.
That-
And if there's a way
yeah.
that we could phrase this,
Yeah.
I would certainly
Yeah. We
look
agree
forward
with
to
you on
supporting
that. That's how I came to the table tonight, that.
I know you
it-
do.
yeah.
You're a school leader that works collaboratively across the
Yeah.
table.
It won't happen otherwise, right? We have to solve it together. I just want to make sure that everybody here on the dais and behind me and watching know that, we're sort of a little bit of a maverick school, right? To come out and say, we want to try something new, and that's the hope. But we know that in trying something new, just as when we started our school back in 2011, when we got this approval, we're not an entity by ourselves. We're not in our own little sphere, and we're very aware of that. We're part of the Boston Public Schools community, and so that has to be part of the equation here, and we recognize that. So I want you to have that confidence that I'm willing, my sleeves are rolled up, my community sleeves are rolled up, to really think out loud. But what I don't want to lose is a great opportunity to keep forwarding the innovation.
And you're doing that in a range of ways, not just the grade configuration,
Yeah,
in a range of ways.
right.
So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank
Yeah.
you.
And thank you
Thank
for
you,
the
Mr.
hard
O'Neill.
questions.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Ms. Oliver Davila.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
I love the Muniz School. I think it's one of the best schools in the district, and I hope my daughter gets to go there one day. And I'll keep applying until I get into BPS. So I don't have questions for you, because I think it's a great school. And full transparency, I was a board member, and I also experienced some of the space tensions. And I'll be probably repeating everything Mr. O'Neill has said, but I just keep thinking about BCLA and New Mission and taking that vote, which I was on the fence about. I do think words matter, and I definitely want to support your innovation, but if we have said that every school has to come before and do a separate vote, then I don't feel comfortable having the 7 to 12 reflected in this plan. I think it should be a separate document voted on. With respect to Mission School, they were in Mission Hill. They were part of the neighborhood where I work, and it was very traumatic to have lost that school. We lost actually 2 schools, the Farragut and Mission having to move to another neighborhood and, obviously like reinvent themselves and be in a new community. And I do think words matter, and I personally do not feel comfortable. And if there's a way that we can come to some compromise where this is taken out and that it's a separate, because I'm not against it, as Mr. O'Neill said. I think you should expand to 7 to 12. I think that's wonderful, but I don't feel comfortable in this moment until we actually have done the bill BPS and we have a plan for the facilities. I do think putting it the same way that there's a letter from whenever Dr. Johnson or whoever, people change, superintendents change, and leadership changes, and that's a letter that said something that didn't happen. And so I don't feel comfortable.
Would it help, if I may, that in the proposal itself and in whatever documents, that I think Mr. Locanto expressed it really clearly, that portion of the proposal is contingent on the Bill BPS work. And I think that may bridge some of your concerns of that words matter, so that at least we can move forward with the body of the proposal, knowing that that portion of it is contingent upon that second vote or second approval, because we've gone through the Bill BPS process. And I don't know if that would be helpful, and that's a way of separating it and still allowing us to move forward with the body of the proposal.
I think it's, I haven't seen your proposal, but when I look at what we have,
Sure.
And it's a description of the equity, it says that if we don't vote on this, you won't be able to have your, the full innovation proposal. And it specifically states that if the 7 to 12 is not in there. So if I read this as a person who maybe hasn't come to this meeting, or I'm a Mission parent, and I see this, I would automatically think.
Right.
So
I think we can separate that. We can redraft that document to read in a way that you're both asking for.
Yeah, I think this vote piece needs to be worded very specifically, because I wouldn't feel comfortable voting on the whole piece, but that's
Right.
just me.
We're clear.
Anything else? Okay, thank you,
I
Ms.
have a,
Oliver.
I do have a proposal for change in language when appropriate. I can put on the table for the school committee's consideration.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to note before we go to Dr. Coleman, thank you again, Mr. O'Neill, for raising the issue of the innovation plan. I want to take responsibility for that it wasn't shared more broadly with the committee. That's an oversight on my part, and I want to make sure that that does get out to the full committee immediately for further consideration. So, Dr. Coleman, you have the floor.
Well, Headmaster Vasquez, as always, after I've heard you speak, I just want to say amen. Thank you. So actually, my questions, and feel free to say this is not a good time to have the conversation, but while we have you, there are also, I think there are a couple of issues that face us as a district that I think you had the wisdom that we would love to get this opportunity to have you share some of your thoughts, not that you're committed to or have to live with it afterwards. But there are two issues I think we face. Is one, when we have such a great project going, how do you plan about sustainability? Right, so none of us are here forever, and I know you're humble enough to know that it's not just you. So what's your thinking about sustainability when you look at your school? What are your plans for sustainability? And then the other question I think that we face as a district is when we have great successes, bright spots, as the superintendent would suggest, what would you think about replication, right? Not growth necessarily, because
Right.
I think the idea that you want to stay at the 550 range is a wise decision. But then we're going to want more of this in other places in the city. So one, your wisdom on sustainability for a great project like you've been leading for the past 5 years and more, and then replication into other such situations. Just any wisdom you have to share with us as we think through these issues as a
I'll
district.
try to share wisdom. I'll call it experience. So on sustainability, I think it's really building a community based on great staff. And it's not about any one person. So I would say that. And that you, as a leader, see all of your staff as leaders. This year, I'm very fortunate to be a bar fellow. And that has actually really helped us think about our community in some interesting ways, because it means I'm going to be out of the building for a little bit of time. And so it really has forced us to think about, okay, so this is not about Dania. It's about all of us. And so how do different people step up, and what are the role shifts that need to happen that can influence us for the good into the future, not just for a short period of time. So I think about sustainability in terms of what's the community that we together are building, and that if any one of us were to step out, the community would continue to thrive. So it can't be person-centric. And that's hard work, it's humbling work. It requires that others think about themselves as leaders. One of the things that the Bar Fellowship has allowed us to do, because of some of the opportunities they've given us, is to create what we're calling a teacher leader corps. And so we're actually training about 11 teachers, 11 of our staff, to really think about this question of leadership and what does it mean. And interestingly enough, and if any of them are watching, I think they're really thinking about this word leadership, and it's a scary word. Like, no, don't call me a leader, I'm not, you know. And so we're in those conversations, but I think that that's what a strong community has to do, is to support the rest of the staff to see themselves as leaders, so that, you know, one day they can carry on the work. So it's not about one person. I think the other thing about sustainability is really thinking about systems in the school, and trying as much as you can to document those systems and to tweak them and keep improving them over time. And that is really complicated and hard work when you're sort of building the plane as you're flying it, right? Which is what we've been doing. And you don't get a break necessarily to do some of that, but I think that's important. Replicability. One of the interesting things that we've learned over time is that, as you know, we're an open enrollment school. Students do not apply to our school They are assigned, they must go through the regular, normal BPS process. And so we've really thought about what could another school do some of the work that we're doing. In theory, yes. I think that what we've learned is that we've been fortunate to find really talented staff that are willing to be learners themselves and that are willing to take the risk themselves around how we're doing this work and figuring out what does it mean to have a true dual language model in a high school. So I think replicability has to do, again, with staff and leadership in another school who would be willing to experiment, to take risks, to learn, to grow, to make some mistakes. I think that's how you are able to replicate. I think replicability also relies on, for example, our school or many of the great schools that we have in BPS that could be replicated. It means that we have to open our doors to share our work and to support someone else who says, well, we'd like to do this in our school because we're going to learn and improve our own practice. So I think that's a complicated mix. I don't think that we've created a school that no one else could do, but it is a complicated model. It just requires a complicated staffing and thinking about how you do curriculum. But I don't think it's impossible that another school community who was really interested in rolling up its sleeves and thinking about it, that they could do it. What I would also say finally is that it requires that we do things a step at a time and not try to roll something out and say, well, we're going to build another, dual language high school and we're going to fill it up in the first year. That doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. That's a recipe for disaster. So, as Michael O'Neill was pointing out earlier on the other question, it's about planning. It's really about planning. It's really about thinking about what are all the pitfalls, what are all the possible, places where you're going to bump, and try to plan as much as possible, but go slow because in the end you'll go faster. And so those are my small points of wisdom.
Amen. Thank you. Well, one more question, follow-up question, if I may. So, would in thinking of replication or extension, I thought your thoughts were very, very helpful, and I appreciate those. Would it necessarily need to be a dual language to replicate a lot of the work you're doing?
No, there are parts of what we're doing that can be
your
replicated.
Success is not just because you're focused.
Yeah.
There are other areas, the arts, the expeditionary learning, that those and the community building. So.
Yeah, just like we've stolen from other schools that are doing some of the great work, right? So we're replicating things that others are doing. We just didn't invent any of these
Shared.
things.
You didn't steal. You shared, right?
Yeah, we did that, right? We shared.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. And Superintendent, I understand you had a few other comments you wanted to make.
It was just a suggestion. I'd love to get the school committee's feedback on this. Under action proposed, presentation overview action proposed, if we were to substitute that language to say something like, the Margarita Muniz Academy is requesting approval for its innovation plan. The plan will allow the school to continue to deepen its current model and develop its post-graduation alumni support programs. The school desires to expand to grades 7-12, but expansion will be contingent on a separate vote of the school committee. With a separate vote of the school committee.
Do members have further
just quick
reaction?
point of order. We're not voting tonight.
We are not voting tonight, and so I think it's helpful that the superintendent wanted to share with the members that he has in fact heard the commentary, specifically respect to the equity impact statement. We do tentatively have this scheduled for a vote at our next meeting. And I think in the interim here, in addition to sharing the innovation plan, we can also share out the equity impact statement with corrected language as well for further consideration by the committee.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir.
How, just feedback though on language like that? Any thoughts?
Please,
Chair, thank you. I
Mr.
would
O'Neill.
look forward to seeing it in writing and reading it in combination with the innovation plan. And I'm sure you can have conversations with the chair and the headmaster that would incorporate the comments that have been raised today.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. I just want to say, make a few additional comments, and thank you again, Headmaster Vasquez, for coming to us today and speaking about your very ambitious plans for the next 5 years. And of course, we spent a lot of time on the grade configuration, but I don't want to have lost in that conversation all of the other good work that you highlighted for us, and all the good work that we've heard from my colleagues as well. I believe everybody on the dais today was with you for that first graduation 2 years ago.
Yes, you were.
And it was a great day to see the genesis of that school. And it's great for all of us to hear from you the plan to take that to the next level. You know, I can remember back the first time I visited your school, being blown away and going into a class on social justice and liberation theology taught entirely in Spanish. You know, let alone hearing those issues discussed in a high school classroom, but in another language in Boston, was very telling about the deep mission of your school. And thinking through, you know, the record of achievement, the way that you've executed your growth over time, and the strategies that you've employed in your school and your staff, Assistant Headmaster Abramowski here as well tonight, in addressing the language needs that are so vital and necessary in our district. We're really looking forward to helping to assist the Moonies in reaching higher goals and move on and support the district in so many different ways.
Thank you.
So we'll look forward again to taking action at our next meeting, and we'll look forward in the meantime to reviewing some of the further materials amongst the membership.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody once again. I appreciate your willingness to engage in the conversation, to consider, and actually for the hard conversations and putting them on the table transparently, because I think that's what will make us all better, and maybe reach this goal together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our final report, the Universal Pre-K update. At this time, I'd like to invite the Mayor's Chief of Education, Chief Ron Dorsey, and BPS Early Education, Early Childhood Director, Jason Sachs, to please step forward with their presentation. But first, I'd like to invite Superintendent Chang to give his opening remarks.
Yes, just very quickly. Today's presentation is not only about the UPK connector system pilot, but it's actually an update about the Boston Universal Pre-K work that Jason and Ron have been working on. We will be talking specifically about a pilot connector system in 2 communities in the city of Boston. This will be a connector between a community program and a BPS school. And the goal is to begin this implementation in fall of 2018. And this will affect 40 K-1 children currently served in 2 community programs. So I will turn it over to Chief Dorsey, who will give us first an update about Universal Pre-K work.
Sure, thank you very much, Superintendent Chang. We're playing around with the AV here, so we'll figure that out, so bear with us a little bit. Before I begin with an update on Universal Pre-K as well as the proposal around the connector pilot, I first want to thank the committee for this. This is citywide work that certainly involves Boston Public Schools, but it involves all of our early learning providers in the city. And so BPS has been collaborative in thinking about how we create a citywide system, and we're looking forward to the continuation of that relationship. I want to take the opportunity to say congratulations to Michael Locanto. Congratulations on being elected chair. And he's walking out of the room. Michael O'Neill, please don't walk out of the room. Because I do want to take the opportunity to say publicly what I think I've said to you privately. One, very thankful for your leadership, but even more so thankful for your mentorship and friendship over my tenure in government and before. So thank you. I want to recognize Jerry Robinson as well, who has served on probably every iteration of an advisory committee related to early learning in the city as long as we can remember, and she's been critical and central to Universal Pre-K and thinking about this. Lastly, I am very happy to introduce tonight someone who many of you may already know, but she is playing a different role. Tiara Dias is with us tonight, who has been in the Office of Early Education in BPS, but she is now been hired as Boston's first universal pre-K director. So can we hear it for Tiara? Next slide, please.
All right.
So we're going to do a few things tonight. First of all, Jason and I will tag team the first couple of items. One, understanding Boston's pre-K context, because we spent quite a bit of time over the last year doing further research to understand supply and demand and a number of issues connected to pre-K, so that would inform our strategy around a citywide UPK system. Jason will give the overview of the UPK strategy, and Tiara will give an overview of the pilot that we're proposing to test our ability to connect community providers to schools so that we can create a pre-K to school, public school feeder system in Boston. This will truly enable us to create a citywide universal pre-K system. So many of you will recall that in the 2013 mayoral race, Mayor Walsh highlighted as one of his main priorities making sure that we create a citywide UPK system. Some of the language that is in this statement actually didn't exist in his prioritization before we got into the work of understanding what pre-K needs to be in the system. And so a couple of things that I'll highlight for you. We are now calling for a mixed delivery system. So when you hear us say this, this is about both school-based pre-K and community-based pre-K providers. We want to take advantage of the fact that we have a good mix of provider types across all neighborhoods, and so our strength is the diversity of the provider types, and we want to make sure that we leverage that. This is also about making sure that every 4-year-old in Boston has a high-quality pre-K experience. The high-quality part probably did not quite exist in the mayor's priority in the 2013 campaign, but what we had to learn is that, and you will hear me say this a few times and maybe ad nauseum, Boston does not have a pre-K access problem. Boston has pre-K quality challenges that we're trying to solve for, and you'll see that in some data that I will present. But following the mayor's 2013 election, he appointed a UPK advisory committee, 35 members, that was then followed by a smaller multi-stakeholder planning team. And so the advisory committee's work is captured in an April 2016 report that, among other things, calls for the mixed delivery system that includes both community-based and school-based providers and highlights the need for deep investment in pre-K quality. The subsequent planning team has worked extensively with a research team to better understand pre-K supply and demand, identify the elements of pre-K quality that are needed to help to assess pre-K quality citywide and to develop the core of the strategy that we'll be implementing for universal pre-K. I also want to recognize that another critical member of that advisory team is in the room, Carly Asiello, who is the Vice President for Community Impact at United Way. And so she's pretty much been with us every step of the way, so thank you for being here, Carly. So the first part of this presentation will give a high-level summary of the supply and demand research, as well as the pre-K quality analysis and the UPK strategy. So if we look at this slide, there are a couple of things to take away from this. You see the total population of children in the city, birth to 5, the number of 4-year-olds in here. I want to draw your attention to the third bullet, 4-year-olds who are enrolled in formal pre-K in the city, 90%. So when you heard me say earlier that Boston really doesn't have an access challenge, most of the families who want to find a pre-K seat in Boston are able to do so. The market share split in Boston is roughly 55% attending Boston public schools and 45% attending community-based settings. That number includes a small proportion for charters and parochials as well, but the lion's share is BPS, our freestanding CBOs, and some of that market share being Head Start as well. What the graph on the right tells you is that our total number of pre-K seats in the city, when you account for every provider type, is just over 7,800 seats. The number of 4-year-olds in the city is 6,000 4-year-olds. We think that that's what we would call the raw demand, if we just take the number of 4-year-olds. The true demand, the number that have applied for K2, we think is a lower number at about 5,300 students or so. But the takeaway for you should be, and we'll say this again, Boston doesn't have an access problem. The supply far exceeds the demand in terms of the number of seats that are available for pre-K and the number of 4-year-olds that we have in the city. So 7,847 seats, 6,000 4-year-olds. So we really don't need to create many more seats in the city. We'll see this illustrated in another way real quickly on the next slide here. So this slide really shows us the supply of pre-K seats by neighborhood in the city. If the neighborhood is green on this map, the number of seats exceeds the number of 4-year-olds in that neighborhood. The 4 neighborhoods that are yellow, we have estimated that the number of seats falls slightly below the number of 4-year-olds, but by and large, in almost every neighborhood in the city, we have more than enough pre-K seats. So if we aren't solving for access, what are we solving for? What we're solving for is quality. And so what we don't have behind every institutional door and in every pre-K room right now are the elements of quality that we have learned over time really do contribute to early childhood success and kindergarten readiness. I'm going to turn it over to Jason Sachs at this point to take you through the elements of quality and talk a little bit about the history of how not only have we identified this, but we've built this level of quality in both school-based programs and community-based programs, and then he will talk to you a little bit about the UPK strategy.
Okay. So I'm just going to go back a little bit in history and say that when we opened up the K1s in the public schools, we also had a pilot program at the Dorchester Boys and Girls Club to test out whether or not we could do a high-quality program in a community-based program. Then the Barr Foundation said, oh, you can do that. Let's see if we can expand it. So they funded a program called Boston Kids, in which we tried to implement the BPS model with coaching and curriculum and supports in community-based programs, so we expanded. And then we got a federal grant, a preschool expansion grant, which Tiara was the manager of, in which we expanded to even more programs doing community-based pre-K programs. And so it has been a 6-year journey of working with community-based partners to figure out how to do a high-quality K1 program. Simultaneously, we worked with the committee chaired by Jerry and myself to really think about what are the elements of quality that we would need in a mixed delivery system. Actually, Michael was on that as well. And so we have been partnering and thinking about quality in community-based programs for a while and many of the unintended consequences. And I should also say that before this mixed delivery system, we have pitted families and asked families to make a difficult choice between having an 8-hour, 8 to 10-hour day, 12 months of the year program versus a public school program, which is a 6-hour day, 9 to 10 months of the year. So sometimes parents had to choose between getting into a school or being a working family, literally. And so we didn't want to create a 2-tier system, so there's always been this interest of how do we create quality in community-based programs, knowing that, of course, they're doing everything they can to have quality, but things like compensation and supports were not the same in community-based programs as they are in the public schools, and funding mechanisms are different in community-based programs. So knowing that we had these kind of parallel worlds, how could we think about partnering with community-based programs in a way that took advantage and leveraged what they do really well as thinking about how we're going to make sure that kids are getting the same educational support so that they'll be ready to succeed in the public schools, because the public school program and the data suggests that if you use a BPS K1, your academic trajectory is much improved. So that's the space we've been sitting in, and so I'm just going to walk you through the elements that we think need to be in the community-based programs. And again, these are vetted and tried out in the 14 classrooms across the programs that we've been working with. So one of the requirements will be a teacher with a bachelor's degree, and that they will be well compensated. So the idea in the preschool expansion grant was that they get the same starting salary as a Boston public school teacher. So that was roughly $51,000 a year. And so that's one piece of this. It's well compensated, highly educated. The other thing is that they're going to get coaching and professional development, the same as the public schools get, and so that means a lot of supports, but it's going to be different. It'll be supports for directors instead of obviously principals, a lot of thinking about sustainability when they have turnover, and really thinking about how to make professional development and supports work in the community-based program. And actually, Tiara can talk a lot about that if you have questions in that area. The other thing is really thinking about supporting families and doing much more around comprehensive services, which is something traditionally the public schools have not done as much as community-based programs, and so it's really thinking about what can we learn from that model and keep expanding. And then we do a lot of assessment and evaluation for learning how to do this. We've actually evaluated the program twice in order to sort of learn where the challenges are and how to improve it. Then what we did is we sort of took the bachelor's degree, the NAYC accreditation, where they are in quality rating according to the state, and we looked across the neighborhoods to see where is the quality challenges by neighborhood, and we've done some analysis there, and that also influences our thinking about where we might want to expand in community-based programs. And then finally, I just want to walk you through what the elements of the K-1. So in net effect, what we're saying is a K-1 space in a community-based program. And so it would be a free school day, school year programming, but remember, it's situated in a 12-month program that does 8-hour days. So this would be a net effect offering a more of a wraparound service. And again, it will be a mixed delivery system. So it'll be in the public schools and in community. And the idea will be that if you are in the Dorchester Boys and Girls Club, you will be connected to a public school. In this case, it would be the Everett, and you would feed into that. And so there'll be opportunity for transitions that Tiara is going to talk about. And the idea is that this will then elevate community-based programs, and the parents, there'll be no consequences for going to that. And then the other thing that we have to think about is, so programs, meaning community-based programs, will now be in net effect connected to a school. And so families that apply to the Everett, for example, would then, if they didn't get into the Everett K-1, would get into the Dorchester Boys and Girls K-1, and then they would feed into it. And so we're going to talk about that system. And so I'll get to TR in 2 seconds, but the last sort of phase of our work is where we're sitting right now, which is hiring a UPK director and setting up an advisory to which no doubt Jerry will continue to be on, and maybe others of you will continue to be on, really thinking through how do we ramp up a workforce in a space in the community base that they'll get credit, they can get degrees, and they'll also be using our curriculum. And so we've been working with UMass Boston. And then the final thing is to really think about, okay, so now we have community-based programs that are offering year-round services, 8-hour days. How can we improve the Boston Public Schools wraparound programs and out-of-school time, because we got to match these programs. So that's sort of the work we've been thinking about, and we will be doing going forward. So we're innovating, and I will let Tiara talk about the feeder system or the connector system.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So as Jason and Ron mentioned, in 2015, Boston Public Schools received a federal grant to implement and support our community-based 4-year-old classrooms with an end goal of expanding accessibility to our families. These PEG classrooms had several requirements, one being that they are Boston residents at the time of their enrollment, that they meet the K-2 age requirement, and also that these families fall below the 200% federal poverty level. The UPK Connector Pilot is a partnership between these 2 K-1 preschool expansion grant classrooms, currently being supported by Boston Public Schools, and our 2 K-2 BPS schools. The pilot establishes a pipeline in which 40 children enrolled in our paid classroom are connected with our K-2 classroom and a corresponding BPS school for the fall of 2018. And of these 40 children, 25 families plan to move forward with the connector option. Data from the pilot will be gathered, and the findings will be used to build a formal partnership between our community-based K-1 programs and our BPS connector schools. So it's important that we test the connector pilot with our community-based programs because, for one, it's aligned with our primary goal of UPK and to provide quality access through a mixed delivery system. We strengthen the bridge for our families between our community-based programs and Boston Public Schools when we partner to ensure families can choose the option that best fits their needs. And regardless of their choice, their student will receive a high-quality educational experience. The connector pilot is important because families can move as a cohort to engage to engage early in their child's K-2 experience, minimize the number of transitions for our 4-year-olds, while, as Jason indicated, mitigating the potential economic impacts on our community providing partners. And we have the opportunity and the right conditions to learn how to do this best. The pilot partnership is important as it allows Boston Public Schools to test our ability to connect our community-based providers and our Boston Public Schools prior to scale. The Connector pilot was based on several guiding principles developed by Boston Public Schools' core values. Coherence as the community K-1 seats should be comparable to our BPS K-1 seats, and families should know where their child is going to go for K-2 at the start of K-1. Students should have a smooth transition from K-1 to K-2, whether they're attending our BPS schools or our community-based K-1 programs. The students are eligible to attend these schools under a home-based system, and this pilot is focused on equitably serving our high-need students. As such, the income of these families participating in the pilot must fall below the 200% poverty threshold. And finally, this connector should offer an opportunity for innovation by early family engagement in our elementary schools to improve schools programmatically. So there were several important considerations prior to proposing this pilot. BPS researched the characteristics of both our Boston Public Schools connector schools and the characteristics of our community-based programs. This included the classroom's configuration, historical selection of the schools, and the ability to serve the children with additional service needs. To evaluate whether our connector system was viable, we checked to ensure that there was an elementary school that could fit the key criteria as noted in the diagram, starting with the 82 BPS schools that currently serve K2+. And to increase the likeliness that families would engage in the elementary school experience early, we wanted to create an opportunity for students to transition together as a cohort, which required 20+ spots in our K2 and the excess of our K1 spots. To minimize the amount of transitions, we did not choose our early learning centers as an option, and finally confirmed the number of schools in each neighborhood where students in the pilot would normally qualify for the K2 schools. And our work continues. This information, as well as the information gathered from the pilot, will help us better understand how to configure the connections between our provider schools and whether a one-to-one connection or connecting our providers to several schools. For the purpose of this pilot, East Boston and Dorchester were selected. East Boston represents a closed system, and Dorchester represents a high-need area, but not all students have access to the same school. The Peg Grant community partners we chose for the Connector pilot is the Dorchester Boys and Girls Club and the East Boston YMCA. They were selected because these programs have had ongoing community-based programs that have worked and been supported through Boston Public Schools, as Jason has indicated, through both our Boston Kids and currently through our PEG programs. Also, the Department of Early Education and Care has identified these high-quality programs in their respective neighborhoods. The Connector School in Dorchester and in East Boston is the Everett Elementary School and the McKay K-8, respectively. These schools were selected based on several factors, including K2 classroom configuration, historical wait list, DESE tier, MCAS level, and the percentage of students in poverty, as well as the demographic information. For the pilot, children from the Dorchester Boys and Girls Club K1 pay classroom will be connected to the Everett, and for K2 in the following year. Children participating from our K1 classroom at East Boston YMCA will be connected to the McKay for the upcoming school year. And again, this is a very small pilot to learn what it takes to scale. As we move forward to a permanent structure, we are considering how to best connect families with our K2 schools and provide ongoing support for our families with our children with additional service needs. So the timeline highlighted is what we've completed to date and our next steps. We've completed the pre-work, the pre-pilot work, sought approval and notified stakeholders. We've scheduled pre-registration events at our community-based programs and continue to provide additional support with the K2 registration process. Finally, as the pilot continues in 2018, we will gain a better understanding of the operational challenges as we create a mixed delivery system in Boston. And data from the pilot will be gathered, as well as the findings being used to form a partnership between the community-based programs as well as our BPS K2 schools. Thank you.
And we will take any questions you have.
Now we're
Thank
ready
you.
for the questions.
All right, well, thank you all for your presentation. I want to first move to Ms. Robinson for her comments and questions, given her deep work in this area.
I really want to say thank you to Jason and your team, and also to the many community-based providers that we've worked with over the years. I don't think many of you realize, but this is almost 20-plus years of work that's been going on to get us to this point. Countdown to Kindergarten is almost 20 years old, and we had started several years before that to have this conversation around connection between community-based providers and the public schools. So it's really the beginning of a great win, small process to get there, but conversations that have been going on for forever. So I really applaud you and all of the work that you all have consistently been going through to do this. One of my questions, I think, really comes from the question that was asked earlier tonight as we think about who's coming, the issue of inclusion. You know, what does inclusion look like right now in our K-1s, K-2s, and do we have the space to also include, as their children coming from the centers, will there be the needs to look at special needs, appropriate placements as well?
The answer is yes. I think that we're going to have to do a lot of thinking about this. As you know, students with disabilities require a certified teacher and credentialed teachers, and so in community-based programs, we don't necessarily have that. And so we're going to have to think about that piece of it. And then secondly, in the public schools, this should not hurt spaces at all for 3- and 4-year-olds. The public schools just might even create more space. I mean, I think this gives us some flexibility, but that's a piece of work that we're going to have to go forward and do some work on. There will be an advisory as we go forward, and this is, you know, as you know, this is one area that's going to need a lot of thinking. So, I mean, I do think inclusion is a broad word, and we can think about all sorts of, like, who are we bringing into the public schools, and this brings in a lot of different opportunities.
What are the biggest concerns you have as you're moving forward? I mean, in terms of, as people have been talking about this in the 2 programs that you have, what have you heard from the folks who aren't in the connector yet? What kinds of broader concerns are out there?
So if I'm understanding the question, I think the biggest concern has come from the community-based providers because kids leave their programs to come to the public schools, and so this has been a destabilizing force for them. And so really the idea that if the Boston Public School really means a mixed delivery system, then we have to create this connector system. And so I think this is a big sign to them that we are really engaged in this process. So that's one. I think the question of 3-year-olds, and what are we doing around 3-year-olds? Are we really talking about classrooms separate for 4-year-olds versus 3-year-olds? I think that's been a big concern. And then just parity, educational parity and access to resources from the community. I think that those have been the largest concerns. From a family standpoint, I think it's always been about quality and access to the highest quality programs and the highest quality schools.
That's all the questions I have right now.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Ms. Oliver Davila.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and all your work. I don't know if you have, my questions may not be able to be answered tonight. They're thoughts and things that I worry about. And although I think the concept is great, I do worry about the financial impact for community-based organizations. So the 2 that you highlighted are very large community-based organizations. They have a whole structure for fundraising that other smaller community-based organizations don't have. And I just wonder about the financial impact and how this conversation is being addressed in a funding level with funders. Because if you're talking about having, you know, I can think off the top of my head, like College Bound Dorchester has pre-K, EBA has pre-K, and then there's other smaller, like family-run, and I just wonder if you know, if that's going to be the, you know, the quality measure. What does that do for the people that are currently working? And I know we want to up everybody, but I'm just thinking in the future in terms of being concerned about fundraising for community-based organizations that are not large, like these other 2 that you are pointing out, and what are, again, the unintended consequences for people that are already working you know, and what is the financial implications for families who might not be able to afford as the costs go up? You know, you're paying somebody more, it means your program is going to cost more. So what about families that can't afford, and you know, how does that work? And I would say that there was a lot of comments around the quality of community-based organizations, and I would just say that there's a lot of things that community-based organizations have, like culture and language and cultural competency, that we don't always see. And so I just want to put that on the table. So I don't know if you've thought about those, like long-term, and thinking about how that's going to affect community-based organizations.
So a few things to share, and I'll let Jason also chime in. First of all, I want to fully agree with you on your comment about the strengths of community-based providers as well. That does need to be recognized. So the mayor's proposal on Beacon Hill to draw funding from the convention center at about $16.5 million a year would fully fund us for UPK. So that money is intended to cover tuition costs. So when we say free school day, school year programming, that means that we want to cover full tuition in community-based provider settings. We want to make sure that we're doing compensation equalization between their professionals and school professionals. So part of this is also about figuring out how is this money used to both sustain operations and invest in quality. Secondly, there are probably at least two dimensions to the investment in quality. One is expanding quality where we know it exists already, and it exists across several community providers. But we also want to better understand where the quality gaps are for particular providers and invest in those gaps as well to help bring you up to the quality threshold, because this is really about creating a no wrong door system. We had about 1,600 parents who either through survey or focus group spoke with us about their desires and the kinds of choices that they want to make. And one of the reasons that we are advocating and building a mixed delivery system is that parents said, some of us want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that community-based provider that we love for a number of different reasons. Others said, we're ready to start our school careers in pre-K with our students. And so we need to make sure that we're resourcing equitably to do that, and we need to build quality in whatever door a family wants to choose in a mixed delivery system. Jason, did you have it?
If you have the answer to your question, then I don't need to answer anymore. But if you do you feel like we answered it?
So you mentioned the $16.5 million. So you've done I know you've done a lay of the land of who everybody is, and is that an adequate amount of money to help all the community-based organizations that do this?
So I think when we've estimated, one, understanding what operational costs are for some of these organizations and what it would cost to invest in each of these elements, I think that we've tried to calibrate as best we can. Now, I think for small organizations, there's a critical piece that we're going to have to figure out how to address, because they are probably paying inefficiently for back office services and some other things that, because they don't have economies of scale built into the business, it's actually more expensive for them to run their businesses in some ways. So, you know, we've talked to Marie St. Fleur, a number of other people who've actually tried to create more cooperative relationships between some of these organizations so that we can create efficiencies of scale in their businesses. This is probably as critical in 0 to 3 in early care as it is in the pre-K business as well. And so I think in complement to this, we want to figure out from an economic development standpoint, what are some of the investments that we need to make in what are oftentimes very fragile organizations, and also organizations where we've got oftentimes low-wage workers and women of color working there. So we've got to invest in the people and the sustainability of the business.
Mm-hmm. And so just going back to my other question about the field right now, so having people that don't have bachelor's degree, which I don't put a lot of stock personally in bachelor's, I'm just going to put it on the table. And I wonder, what does that look like for people that are working now, and how do they get there, and what stops them from taking a job? If you're saying, if I heard you correctly, that the salaries would be raised like 51 versus BPS, so what would stop somebody who has a bachelor? How do we make sure that people aren't fleeing to BPS, and then we don't have staff that are attracted and want to work in a community-based organization because it's not competitive, and now you have your bachelor's degree, and now there's a whole huge hueco, like, hole.
So fortunately, the preschool expansion grant has given us an opportunity to really test this model. One of the things that I noticed very quickly is that the majority of our community-based program lead teachers do have bachelor degrees. In fact, many of them hold master degrees. And by providing them an opportunity to have both the professional development with our district teachers, as well as support from the United Way, we're able to provide additional coursework and professional development support for our teachers that are our bachelor degree teachers, as well as teachers that are working towards that degree. And we're also focusing not just on the teacher, but the instructional team. So really thinking about how well is this teacher supported by both the director, the coach, as well as considering family engagement. So you mentioned, one of the strengths of our community-based programs. And one of the things that I've noticed very quickly is their strong family engagement. So not only how do we support our teachers with the bachelor's degrees, but also how do we engage families to better understand what it is that they need so that we can continue to meet those needs. Did that answer your question?
Just want to add that compensation equalization is important as a part of the UPK strategy, because currently where you've got community-based teachers who, when they acquire their BA degree or master's degree, that BPS job is that much more attractive because the pay scale is a lot different. If we want to keep our community-based providers strong, when they get that degree, they need to make the same kind of money. And so we want to make sure that professionals are able to choose where they want to work. You should be in the setting that you want to be in, but we shouldn't create labor market incentives such that we aren't paying you adequately.
Well, I just want to say I'm very excited that community-based organizations will receive support, because I know running one, it takes a lot of effort to fundraise. So I just want to make sure that, again, the unintended consequences that we don't, that we make sure we think about that piece. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Olividala. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, to the three of you, thank you for the presentation. I can't say strongly enough about how important universal pre-K is in this city, and the fact that the mayor is leading the charge, and having you, particularly Chief Dorsey, working on this directly. We know the benefits, right? I am fully supportive of it. I get dismayed when I see leaders at the state level question the benefits of pre-K, and I'm delighted that the mayor is leading the charge. And anything we can do to help further the effort to get a funding stream particular for that, because the fiscal challenge is real and difficult, delighted to help. Two quick questions. One, channeling what we heard earlier, there is a difference between an aspirational goal, which is what this is, and a legal requirement. Mm-hmm. And so what do we do in this to ensure that our students with disabilities who are on IEP, the legal requirement is being met? And is it a preference at BPS schools, try to steer them there versus community? Talk to us about those students.
I think they would be served in the public schools until we work this out. So I think it's business as usual until we resolve any legal challenges. I think it is the public school's responsibility to serve children equally. And just historically, just so you know, actually, you were probably part of it, was when we went to K-1 in the public schools. Before, they were half-day programs in special education, then we had to move them to full day, and so we opened up full day. So I think, again, this should not be detrimental in any way to students with disabilities. In fact, I think what it's going to do is actually strengthen community-based programs and provide more resources and supports around transitions, around supports in community-based programs. One of the things we've experienced in this preschool expansion grant is the need for access to services, and we have been working with the Department of Special Education to really think better about how to support students with disabilities that are currently in community-based programs. So I think this is actually going to enhance and strengthen those programs. But legally, I don't think we're doing anything different.
And have you worked with SpedPAC and talked with them about this?
No, so
If not,
I
I
think we
would
should. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think
encourage
as we
that
now
happen.
grow this system,
Right,
we're going to
because the parents of students with disabilities need to be aware and what the impact would be. The second point I wanted to raise, and I really applaud that I love the idea of working with community-based organizations and helping them get to the professional level that we have. I know a number of them, and I know how hard they work and the challenges they face. I love the fact that you're going to try it as a pilot at 2 schools and learn and think it through, because my one concern that I want to raise, and it's using the same language as Ms. Oliver Davila, which is unintended consequences. But in this case, thinking through, and I'm sure you've thought it through, so help me out with your thinking, are we unintentionally creating a way for some parents to game the system? Does this get them into a school by getting into a community-based program? Talk to me about that one, please.
So we share the concern, and I think the conditions are right now for testing this at a very small level, in part because the pre-expansion grant is still in effect. This is a federal program that requires us to work with students at the 200% or greater level of the federal poverty line. So this means that an equity focus is built into the program. What we're going to have to learn about going forward is how do we preserve that kind of framework going forward. Now, this is still governed by the home-based rules. You still have to qualify for that school because it's in your, it's close to your address and it meets all of the priority requirements. But I think the equity piece of this is what we're going to have to figure out how to preserve. This gives us a little time while the federal program is still in effect to make sure that we're doing this for the right students. The last piece of this is the pilot. Nobody is signing up to come to either one of these providers right now. So we aren't getting new parents in. This is for families who are already in these programs. And so we didn't want to create an immediate incentive in the pilot for somebody to say, oh, is this what they're doing? I'm going to quickly figure out how to get to East Boston. I'm going to quickly figure out how to get to North Dorchester to do this. We wanted to work with the families who are currently in there, who've already expressed a desire to be at these 2 community centers and to potentially attend these 2 schools. This is really going to have to be a learning opportunity for us over the next year. And when we come back in September, and certainly before choice season starts, we're going to need to report back to you and to the public about what we've learned and what we think the implications are for building the system out at scale, and how we think we can preserve the equity focus that, at least for now, the federal government is helping us maintain in this.
But does the ones that are already in those programs that are now being, in effect, guaranteed seats, will they be blocking out other parents who wanted to go for those seats at the K-2 level?
No, so these are children who are normally eligible for these seats, and so they're just applying within the K-2 registration.
But they have preference.
They
do have preference. So, but again, these are programs that have a larger number of seats. But in this year, they will have preference. In the future, so if we were to expand the system, the idea would be that all family, it would be as if you went to the, you would apply to the Everett, and you would be offered the Boys and Girls Club program as if it was a K-1. So going forward, they'll be subjected to all the policies of BPS. So it's like applying to a BPS school. So that will pull the equity. For this year's pilot, they do get preference.
But let me also offer this to you. Tiara said it real quickly in her comments. I think what we're going to have to learn about is the optimal configuration for this as well. So we've set the pilot up as a one-to-one relationship between a provider and a school. But we've also talked about to make sure that we preserve choice and kind of even out the spread of access. Should we be connecting a provider to multiple schools? So instead of the Dorchester Boys and Girls Club just being connected to the Everett, should it also be connected to the Mather and to the Murphy and a couple of other schools, so that there are multiple choices in there, and we're preserving some of the seats across a spread of regional schools? That's something else that we're going to have to learn about.
So as My fellow member, Ms. Oliver Davila, knows better than anyone. Parents applying to get their children into kindergarten and not getting seats can be very frustrating. Very frustrating experience. And so I like the fact that you're thinking through, you know, not now giving another reason for parents to be extremely frustrated, but in fact, it sounds like you're trying to solve a problem, but thinking through what are the unintended consequences of this, and are we setting up a system that may cause concern for folks is very helpful. So
just one final comment. I think another unintended consequence, which is on the good side, is that we might find more families using BPS because of the community-based connector system. So we might actually see more people going to K2 and BPS because of this. And so that's something to think through too. Because we've already, for example, seen that it looks like 6 families from the Dorchester Boys and Girls Club are now want to go to the Everett, whereas before, I think 1 had. So I think this is going to be an interesting process to learn about.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. O'Neill. And as I'm learning very quickly, and by going last, I get all my questions asked, and particularly with respect to Mr. O'Neill's questions around access and assignments. We know how vital that is to our system, and how important it is to parents. And I want to thank each of you, as well as Dr. Chang and other members of his team, for discussing these issues in detail with me offline this week. This is a very important issue, and it's going to be very interesting to see the results of the pilot and the information that you will come back to us with prior to the next school year, registration round in the next school year, to give us further recommendations on taking action here. So again, I want to thank you and join in with my colleagues and say thank you for the comments, the efforts that you've made here. Thank you to Ms. Robinson for her support and her work in this area on behalf of the committee. I know I've witnessed this for the entire 4 years I've been on the committee, and I'm very appreciative of the work that everyone has done. And welcome, Ms. Dias, to your position, and we look forward to working with you in further detail. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And where are we now? I guess we're moving on to public comment on reports. Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. I'd like to invite Ms. Peggy Wiesenberg to please step forward with her public comment.
Thank you. I want to give a shout out to Michael O'Neill and to our new chair, and to the ladies, and to Mr. Coleman, and to the student. I want to talk on the pre-K. I am speaking extemporaneously. I learned a lot from that presentation. But before I get to the pre-K, I hope, Superintendent, that when you post information about Discover BPS on tomorrow's website, that you will make transparent for everybody, for the 127 or 25 schools that now have a new quality framework tier, what, for each school, is it tier 1, 2, 3, an option, capacity, or regional school? We know we can go on the DESE website and see the prior MCAS score, but thanks to Hardin Coleman and the committee that worked on this, everything's re-ranked and baskets are different. So in the spirit of transparency, we should have a list of those 125 schools and how they're ranked now under that new framework. With the connector school, although this is a pilot, I do have pause about the fact that we haven't done the equity analysis. It's forthcoming under agreement now of the home-based system, but this is proposing a guarantee, another guarantee for some people to access seats, and by implication, others not. I think we when it comes to pre-K and feeders and connectors, we need a very broad community discussion across the city. So hopefully, if Mr. Dorsey just said he's going to come back and propose and feedback to you, this has to be a big citywide conversation. When we think of home-based, I'm also hoping that we could look on improving home-based for those most vulnerable, the poverty students, the homeless students, and so forth. I think it would be useful for you to post the MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding that is part of this grant, so that you all have it and we can all see it. And I do want to flag that parents have noticed that in Discover BPS this year, the district has moved K2 registration from round 1 to round 2. And it would be very helpful to have an explanation of why that was done, why it was done as an operational matter and not a policy matter, and what the equity implications are. That's one of the reasons I have an issue with this, but there's bigger issues about English language learners and assessments. It is not just an issue of the students with disability and who's going to be guaranteed seats and when they get them. And I know my time's up, but I do question why the Murphy School wasn't picked. It's 940 students, K-8. It has a multilingual SEI program, 20 seats there in K2, and it has 37 general ed seats and 3 vision impaired seats. And the Everett is a tiny school. It has 37 K2 seats. So
Ms. Wiesenberg.
those are my questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Lecanto, that concludes our speakers for public comment.
Well, thank you, Ms. Sullivan. To my fellow members, new business? Well, that concludes our business for the evening. Hearing none. Our next school committee meeting is going to take place on Wednesday, January 24th at 6 p.m. in this room. If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Sounds like unanimous consent. There's a second. Good night. Thank you all.
No discussion?